Great. So, welcome everybody, and particularly a welcome to Greg Wagner. Thanks a lot for joining us, Greg, and welcome to the December meeting of the Dealey Plaza UK Society. Now, for those of you that are not aware, Greg is the founder and proprietor of the JFK Assassination research website, tangodown63.com. And I'm going to put a link to that website actually in the chat area so you can all go and check out the excellent website. And what he's going to talk to us about today is the Window Watchers, which is around the suspicious activity in the Texas State Book Depository in Dealey Plaza. So without any further ado, over to you, Greg.
Well, thanks, Tony. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Hear you fine, Greg.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for inviting me today. I was excited to get to talk to you guys. Some of you I know a little bit virtually. Bart, it's nice to see you. I've heard your voice, I think, for probably years on various podcasts and so forth, and we've interacted on Facebook and on some of the groups. So nice to see you, Bart.
Good to have you.
Yeah. And Joe, I think we're Facebook friends. We've bumped into each other a little bit over the years. Neil, thanks for reaching out and inviting me today. I appreciate that. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Is that Bill Fraser? Is that Fraser eating a sandwich behind you in your basement? Having his lunch?
There's all kinds of stuff behind me in my basement. Who knows what exactly? So, and looks like Ryan might be in his kitchen. He's getting something to eat, but I can appreciate the Pink Floyd T-shirt, mate. I like that. So, so I guess I'll get started here. So thank you. I'm just as far as who I am, and just a guy. I live in Central Ohio, so I live in Gahanna, Ohio. It's a suburb of Columbus. And for those of you that know anything about U.S. geography, sort of the middle of the country. And it's had an interest. I started gaining an interest in the case when I was a young kid. Had to do a book report on something historical, and this seemed like an interesting topic. And I cracked the book. It was, oh gosh, I was at one of my local, and it was Hugh McDonald, Appointment in Dallas, which I don't know if there's much useful information in that book or not. I couldn't even tell you what it was about or what it was purporting. But that was back when I was probably 14 or 15 years old. And as you guys all know, it's a rabbit hole, right? You go down, and once you go down and start digging into the case and trying to figure things out, it takes you in all sorts of interesting directions. So Tony was kind enough to make my website sound very official and wonderful, but really it was just my attempt to take some of the photos and documents that I collected over the years and put them somewhere that was easy to share with some of my fellow researchers and friends, and just a place to store some of the collected material that I have. So thanks for the kind words on the website. So I think, I don't know, I've heard different researchers comment on this over the years, and I'm finding it to be true now. I'm in my 50s, and in my, I don't know how many years of researching and looking into the case, but kind of what I found to be true is that when I first started, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? There's information on, there are dozens of aspects to the case that are fascinating and well worth anyone's time, but it's tough to try to sort of deal with everything at one time, or deal with the entirety of the case. And I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but I sort of focused in on this Texas School Book Depository aspect and what was going on there. And Bart, I know I'm just from talking to you over the years, I know you're well aware of the stories of James Jarman, Bonnie Ray Williams, and Harold Norman, and I'll throw Jack Doherty in there too, since he said he was on the 5th floor at the time of the shots. I think it was reading those statements several years ago, and like you guys, I know I'm probably not giving anyone here any new information that you don't already know, but those statements are just a train wreck. They have multiple major problems that conflict with one another, and really that deserves its own separate day, separate analysis, and effort. So we won't talk a lot about those guys here today. We'll touch on them some, but that's kind of what sent me down this 75 statements of these 17 witnesses. You know, I'm reading the statements from Jarman, Norman, Williams, Doherty, trying to make sense of them years ago. And it occurred to me that I knew there were people around the plaza that had made statements about, you know, they saw this in this window, and that it was a little bit all over the place, but I didn't really realize the scope, didn't know the names of all the witnesses or how to attack that. So to try to figure out what might have been going on with Jarman, Norman, Williams in those window, the three black guys that were allegedly in those windows. And I'm going to say allegedly, and I think on the slides that I have, which you'll see coming up, that I've marked a few of the slides with photos that I've marked up. And Tony, you could probably move to the next slide there. But I've got these marked up as alleged positions, and I'm not suggesting that Jarman, Norman, and Williams weren't on the 5th floor. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know. They had to be somewhere, and so they in my opinion, they very well may have been up there. But if they were, they saw a lot more than they ever let on, which is probably why their statements are a mess. So when I say alleged, when I look at the Dillard photo, I can't tell who we see in those windows. I'm not sure if you guys can, but I know some people have looked at those copies and tried to determine what exactly they're seeing, and I can't make it out. But and on the next couple slides, you'll see the Dillard photo. I think is the next slide, the one I was talking about. So one of the things I find interesting is there are reenactment photos of Jarman, Norman, Williams and their positions in these windows. And so I think some folks see those reenactment photos floating around and they say, well, of course it was those three guys. You can see them plain as day. But when you look at the actual Dillard photo, and maybe this is the best copy that I could find. If you go to the website, you can actually download a full size image of this, and it's out there on the internet. It's not anything anyone can't find, but maybe a better quality version would give us a better look at who's in those windows. And as I say, maybe it's them, maybe it's not. I don't know. There are definitely a couple of dark skinned guys.
I've got a great quality image for you. It's about 6,000 pixels, so it's huge. And can you make it out, Bart? Can you make out who those guys are? Yeah, they are, but they're too neatly pasted in. That's my issue with that photograph.
Okay, I'd love to see it sometime. If you have to share, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And so, and then the next slide is the Powell photo, and we'll talk a little bit more about him later. So we've got the Hughes slide, which is about 10 seconds before shots fired, the Dillard photo, which is about 15 seconds after shots fired, and the Powell photo, which is about 30 seconds after shots fired. I say about because you read the various statements, and it says 20 seconds or 40 seconds or so. The 30 seconds, 15 seconds, the 10 seconds before, those are my estimates. So they may not be exact, but it's roughly the timing of those. So when I was looking at these guys, trying to figure out what was going on and why their statements made no sense, I thought looking at these images and seeing what the witnesses around Dealey Plaza saw in those windows might be helpful, might be instructive in helping us figure out what was really going on up there. So I didn't really start out with an agenda to do anything more than that. And frankly, I didn't realize there were 17 people who were on record as having seen activity in those upper floor windows around the time of the shots. So I was surprised that there were as many as 17 people on record, and 17 people that I've found. There are a lot of good researchers out there, some of them on this presentation, on this call. who maybe there are other people that I'm missing. Maybe there are statements I'm finding. I did a Lancer presentation similar to this about a year ago, and since then I found 2 or 3, I think, new statements from witnesses that I had already identified. So when I say statements, those could be FBI reports, Secret Service, reports from law enforcement, newspaper articles, authors who had interviewed some of these witnesses. So, and as you guys know too, there's some, as we talk about these witnesses, and we'll go into detail on some of the more interesting ones. And some of the other ones, there's not a whole lot to say, so those will be quick hitters, and we'll spend some time then at the end talking about what this means and what we think the implications might be. So with that, let's see. I think it's important too, when we talk about these statements, and when you guys, I think, Tony, were you able to share with the group the 2 matrices that I sent over? The 2 kind of large documents that had detail about who saw what. And
I haven't. Forgive me, Greg. I haven't done it. I will do that.
Okay. Yeah. No worries. And they're on my website too. They're in the blog section of the website. I started to build a blog post. I started about a year ago with the intention of writing up this presentation and writing up my findings, and it's been slow going, but the blog section of my website has the beginning of that post and the 2 matrices that I'm referring to, the witness matrix and the suspect description matrix. These are basically a way to list the witnesses that we're talking about, and in a nutshell, kind of here's what they saw, and then it's laid out with, whether they gave, one statement to the FBI, or whether there are, I think we've got, it's either Rowland or Brennan. One of them has, Brennan, has 14 different episodes or statements that I've been able to find. So those are all listed on there. And the cool thing about the matrices, I think, and Tony's got there's 2 of them. Yeah, the witnesses, and then the other one is kind of the specifically to do with if the witnesses observed the suspect well enough to have a physical description. That's on the suspect description matrix. So there's 2 matrices there. The cool thing about the witness matrix, I think, is that if you look at, I'm sorry.
Somebody sneezed.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Is that each one of the witness statements to which I refer, there's a hyperlink contained in the document in the matrix. So you can click on it and it'll take you right to that statement or that YouTube interview or a reference to a quote in a book or whatever it might be. So you can click on those links and pull that stuff right up. So we'll get started with the next slide, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah. So southwest corner of Houston and Elm, right, front and center, right across the street from the book depository. And I would like to mention too, this is my this is all work that I did, and these are kind of the if I make any assumptions, or if anyone, I guess, has any questions, or I'm open to being corrected, or open to discussion on any of this stuff too. I know that the JFK research community, we're not always in harmony with everything we think. So no worries. If you have a dissenting opinion or something you want to bring up or challenge, I'm open to that and welcome that. So we'll talk a lot about Brennan and Amos Ewans, and just a little bit about the other 3 folks on this page. Brennan, I mean, I think I'm probably not going to share much here about Howard Brennan that you guys don't already know. You're very esteemed researchers and well versed in the case, but we'll have to talk about Brennan a little bit since he's such an interesting character. But several major problems with Howard Brennan, right? He was the Warren Commission's star witness, the guy who they thought they could put up there and say, oh yeah, he saw a guy matching Oswald's description in the window in question, and he was going to be their star witness against Oswald. It turns out that Howard Brennan says that he was sitting on that retaining wall facing the southeast corner of the book depository, front and center, and he gave a description which we'll go into. But one of the interesting things, and there was an article on Kennedy's and King that delved into this subject specifically, and I don't remember the author's name, but it's over there at Kennedy's and King. I'm sure you can search it, but it was talking about Howard Brennan and the fact that he wasn't positioned. He wasn't even sitting where he said he was sitting, right? He was, he says he was sitting facing the Texas School Book Depository when, if you look, for example, at the Zapruder film frame 188, Z188, you can see clearly Howard Brennan with his construction hat is sitting on that wall, but he's sitting on the east side of it, facing Houston Street, watching the motorcade come up Houston. And as the limousine, as Kennedy turns left onto Elm Street, Brennan's body, he's facing Houston Street, and he's got his head turned around to the left, craned around, trying to see the limo and the activity over there as it turns the corner onto Elm. And again, you can look at Z188 to see what I'm talking about. So, and another interesting thing about that is when he's being questioned by the Warren Commission, and I think it's Liebler, I don't have it in front of me, but whoever's questioning him with at his Warren Commission testimony, excuse me, and they caught him on this. If you read that little exchange, the Warren Commission attorney questions his positioning and, hey, if you're seated here, why can't I see you, or why can't I see your legs dangling over the front, or however he words it. And there's a little exchange between him and Brennan, and it's very clear that the Warren Commission, the person questioning him, understands in that moment that Brennan wasn't where he said he was. But they move right by it and sort of let that go. So I wouldn't say it's impossible for Brennan to have seen what he said he saw from that position, but it would have been much more difficult. Some of the other things with Howard Brennan, and again, he's got 14, he's on the record that I could find 14 different times between the different FBI reports, Dallas police reports, Warren Commission. There was a book published. He died, gosh, I don't have it handy, but the book was published, I think, about 4 years after Brennan died. So he was, he did this book called Eyewitness to History with a guy named Cherry Holmes. And I don't know who this Cherry Holmes guy has also passed away. But I think it's interesting in this book, it kind of sticks very much to the Warren Commission version of things. But I think it's interesting, the book, Brennan wrote the book with this guy, and the book was published, I think, several years after Brennan's death, which I think is sort of notable. But anyway, so back to the problems with Mr. Brennan. He was going to be their star witness. Wasn't where he said he was. He claimed that in one of his pieces of testimony that the shooter that he saw, and I'll pardon me while I'll read you from my witness matrix. Howard Brennan, just a summary of what he said he observed. A man in the southeast corner window multiple times between 12:22 and shots fired. His Warren Commission testimony, if you haven't read it, is pretty fascinating. It's combative at times. He's almost like a hostile witness at times. He's supposed to be their star guy who's going to put Oswald in that window. but all of his statements deserve some attention. But that Warren Commission testimony is fascinating, and it's fascinating in that that he wasn't where he said he was, and they knew it, and they let him slide on it. He gets into, and this is broken down into a couple different places in his Warren Commission testimony, but in terms of the three black guys, Drummond, Norman, and Williams, and who he saw in which window, it gets contentious and confusing at times when the Warren Commission, they really want him to say, yeah, I saw these three, because they're there with him. They flew on the same plane with Brennan to the Warren Commission hearing, and so they're there. And the Warren Commission really wants him to say that those are the guys that he saw, the dark-skinned guys that he saw in the windows below the shooter. And it's contentious, it's confusing. And at one point, Brennan even says flat out, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close, if it's not exactly the right quote, but he declines to identify them. He says, no, I can't tell for sure if it was one of those guys, which I thought was interesting. So anyway, I apologize. I have to refer to my notes here because it's hard to keep all these guys straight.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, and then so as you guys know, there's multiple problems with the lineup that Brennan may have taken part in. He declined to identify Oswald as the gunman he witnessed 3 different times, once to Forrest Sorrells, once to the FBI, and once to the Dallas police. So 3 separate times he declined to identify Oswald. And I think the closest he came was saying words to the effect that, in terms of this lineup that I'm looking at, the guy who closest or most resembles the person I saw was Oswald, something like that. He couched it very vaguely, but and I'm not an expert in the lineup. I think there are those that question even whether that lineup took place or how many lineups there were, and there are researchers that have done really good work on that. So, Bart.
I'd like to add, it was Sorrells who brought Brennan in, and they put all their poker chips on Brennan for identification of the shooter that shot at JFK. But when you look at where's the evidence for that particular lineup as such, there's nothing. There's only a little card that says that Brennan was part of the lineup. Fritz needed to be really tugged and say, listen, we want to put this guy to have a lineup as such. The only bit of proof they have of the actual lineup happening as such is a little Rolodex card type thing that has his name mentioned on it. There is no other report whatsoever. Then again, it's quite easy to explain because he wouldn't pick him out as such, and he was their number one witness. So therefore, they just covered it up as much as they possibly could.
Yeah, I agree. That's an excellent point. And I have to, it was either Neil or I was another member of your group, James. So I don't know if James is with us today, but one of those guys brought up something to me that I didn't know about Brennan after my Lancer presentation. Excuse me. It pointed to me that in Jim Bishop's book, I think it was The Day Kennedy Was Shot. Yeah, The Day Kennedy Was Shot, page 193. Jim Bishop mentions that that Brennan's first statement to law enforcement there on the scene, and I think it was, I think it was Gene Barnett, if I'm not mistaken. But he identified the shooter that he saw as being on the 5th floor, according to Bishop. which was a revelation to me. In going through Brennan's various statements, the 13 other places I could find he was on record, he either said 6th floor or he didn't identify the floor. So I had never seen a reference to Brennan identifying the 5th floor as the floor the shooter was on. But Jim Bishop mentions that in his book. And sadly, the book is not sourced that well. If you look at the bibliography, he doesn't tie specific statements to a specific source. His bibliography is very general in nature. He just sort of lists a list of interviews and books and articles and paper, the documents or whatever he looked at, and to source the information for his book. And it's impossible to tell where he got that bit of Brennan saying 5th floor. But I think that's very interesting. And, the other thing in Brennan's Warren Commission testimony and his book, the two places where we've got, direct information from Howard Brennan that hasn't been filtered through the FBI or law enforcement. His statements about this encounter, about when he first identified to the police where he saw this shooter, or that he saw something. Again, if you go to the matrix, and you could click on the links to each statement and read them all for yourself. But Brennan's description or Brennan's quotes that he puts forth in his Warren Commission testimony in his book are interesting in that they're sort of vague. He says things like, "I told the officer that the man you want is in that building," or I saw the shooter and he was in that building. But there's no, but that's it, right? There's no, the logical question back to him, if he's not offering, well, okay, where exactly in the building, right? What floor, what window, tell me more. That's not part of those exchanges, at least as the exchanges between Brennan and the law enforcement officer on the scene, the DPD officer, which I think is Barnett. I apologize, I don't have that committed to memory yet, but whoever that first DPD officer was he talked to, I find it because the logical thing, the logical comment would be not the guy you want is in that building, right? It would be, he's on this floor, in that window, whatever. And if that's not being offered, you would think that the very first question the officer would have back to him, or the Warren Commission attorney would have back to Brennan, would be, okay, where did you see this guy, right? Especially on scene when the police are still trying to figure out what happened and where the shots came from. But Brennan doesn't offer anything about a floor or a particular window in those in his Warren Commission testimony initially, and then in his book. He eventually settles on the 6th floor when they pin him down on it. But I think that's interesting. I think just the exchange, the initial exchange between him and the people in the Warren Commission and in his book, that I think it's interesting that he does not. It's almost like when you listen to impressionist jazz music and you're listening for the notes they don't play. I just find that an interesting omission with Brennan. They don't want to hear. They don't ask him what floor. So anyway. So Howard Brennan, yeah, as Bart pointed out, right, they put their chips on him. He was going to be their star witness. And I just read through his statements if you get a chance, but in particular, the Warren Commission testimony, I find fascinating because he's their star guy. And to me, it's an adversarial situation. They're trying to get him to say things that he clearly, to me, doesn't want to say. And a lot of it's around those three black guys and where they were.
Yeah, that's really true, because in his book, he wrote a book called Eyewitness to History.
Yes, sir.
And in that book, he says, and I quote, "During the lineup, The officer walked over to me, sticking out his hand to shake. He greeted me by name, and I knew if he knew who I was and what my connection with the case was, then others must know. He asked me, "Does the second man from the left look most like the man you saw?" He was talking about Oswald, and I knew what he wanted me to say.
Yep. Yep. And I wonder, I don't know, and I'll get off of Brennan here after this, but I don't know what his deal was exactly. I think he maybe saw something and then just, I don't know if they, I don't know how much they leaned on him to say certain things or how much he just got caught up in the whole, he saw something and he once the information about Oswald started coming out and finding a rifle on the 6th floor and yada, yada, maybe he tried to adapt his story to that. I'm not sure what his deal was. You guys have probably seen the YouTube video of Brennan. There's one or two out there, and I'm not trying to beat him down, but he doesn't come across as the sharpest guy in the world. I don't think he doesn't come across to me as someone who's has malicious intent, or is somehow making all this up to frame anybody. I think he was maybe a guy who saw something and embellished or tried to say he saw more than he actually did, and that really comes when you read that Warren Commission testimony. If you read it carefully, it really comes out. It's a train wreck. So their star witness was the exact opposite of that. I think it blew up right in their face. So I don't know what Howard Brennan saw, and I don't know exactly what his motivations were, but he may have seen something in one of the windows. But I don't think we could take much of what he said seriously. He also, by the way, in one of those too, he also said the gunman was firing from a standing position, which I know you guys have know the layout of the Texas School Book Depository and the how those windows are set up. So, I mean, the window in question, the Oswald window, was, I think, only open about a foot or so. It wasn't all the way open. There's no way a gunman standing from a standing position in any of those windows could have done any of the firing. But that was Mr. Brennan's observation, which I found comical, that the gunman was standing. So anyway, Howard Brennan's maybe the worst, the least credible witness on this list. I'm going to skip Robert Edwards for a moment and talk about Amos Ewans. I think Amos Ewans is one of the most fascinating witnesses on the list, and one of the most credible. And, at last check, Mr. Ewans was still with us and living in or near Dallas. Excuse me. I've talked to I believe his son a couple of times. I got a phone number for Mr. Ewans, and called up, just cold called a few times over the last few years. And the person I'm speaking with identified himself as Amos Ewans. And as we talked, I realized it wasn't the Amos Ewans I was looking for, but it's his father. And he's the guy I spoke with is a nice guy, but clearly protective of his father, and wouldn't entertain letting me speak to him, which is sad, because I think Ewans was, I believe, about 13 years old at the time, and I think he was, he said exactly what he saw. I think he was a brave kid, and the thing that was really interesting to me about Amos Ewans, there are a few things, but one of them was when I listened to his HSCA interview. So on my website under Amos, under Mr. Ewans, where his different pieces of testimony are listed, you can click on the HSCA testimony and listen to the audio. Researcher Dennis Morissette had that audio and was kind enough to share that with me and allow me to put that on my website. But again, I would encourage you to look at that witness matrix and read through Mr. Ewan's various statements. We'll talk about it a little bit here. But I found his HSCA the interview, the audio, to be fascinating, because if you look at the sequence of his what floor he identified this shooter to be on, right? It's either unspecified, the 5th floor, or the 6th floor. It's sort of all over the place. But, you know, some of these are FBI information that's been filtered through law enforcement reports and through the FBI. The HSCA audio interview is fascinating. So at one point in that interview, I think it's about 5 minutes in or so, I'm not exactly sure the point in time, but the interviewer asks him, Mr. Ewans, where, you know, what floor was this shooter on? And he says, 3rd window from the top, which would be the 5th floor. 3rd window from the top. So then they go on for a couple of minutes and they talk about whatever. And the interviewer returns to that and he says, well, now which floor did you say you saw the shooter on? And he says, 3rd window from the top. And the interviewer said, well, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically the interviewer was like, well, the evidence, something about the 6th floor. He was pushing him toward the 6th floor. So Mr. Ewan said 3rd window from the top. And then later again said 3rd window from the top again. And the interviewer says, are you sure about that? And then Mr. Ewan says, well, 5th or 6th. So it was kind of like he's trying to, you know, and if you read through the other statements where he says, I think his Warren Commission testimony, yeah, and actually I'm not sure which one that is, but there are a couple other statements where he identified the 5th floor. But in his Warren Commission testimony, I think he relented and identified the 6th floor. But at any rate, that audio is worth listening to, because he recounts exactly what he saw. And I just find it interesting that even at that, this is 1977, right? So even at that late time, he's saying, you know, where'd you see this guy? 3rd window from the top. Even that many years later, he's still adamant about that. And then the interviewer, are you sure? Well, okay, 5th or 6th. But so if you listen to that, that's what I got out of it, was that he was still trying to tell us what he saw, and the interviewer was still not wanting to hear that. So I think that's pretty fascinating. He also says at the end of that audio, he talks about how he was intimidated and says words to the effect, they were making me say things that I wasn't. They were trying to make me say things that I wasn't saying. So when he was interviewed by law enforcement that day, there was, you know, he was a 13-year-old boy, no parent or guardian present. It's just him and a bunch of middle-aged, you know, white guys in suits with suits and badges, and I think it seems like he felt pretty intimidated. So, but you can listen to that for yourself and decide what you think. But when I listened to that audio, you know, it felt to me like he was still trying to tell us 3rd window from the top, and they still didn't want to hear that. So, so that's Amos Ewans. I think he'd be, if anyone has any, you guys are in the UK, so I don't know if maybe you don't, but you know, if anyone had any connections in Dallas, any way to get to talk to Mr. Ewans, I think he'd be a fascinating person to talk to. The other thing that came out that I didn't know in that audio interview is he talks about having a camera and taking photographs. I had never heard that. And it's not, to my knowledge, in my reading of all these other statements in his testimony, I don't recall ever seeing a reference to him having a camera or taking pictures, ever. So I don't know if that just never came up in any of those interviews. I kind of find that hard to believe. It would be sort of an important thing to leave out. So it either didn't come up, or if he did mention it, they didn't put it in the reports. And it's really sad and frustrating because he was positioned right there, front and center. And he took, I forget how he phrased it, but the interviewer asked him, what, like, what did you take pictures of? And he said, everything I could, or I took pictures of everything around me, or so words to that effect. So, but sadly, according to Mr. Ewans, he doesn't know what happened to the camera. He thinks he probably left it on that retaining wall or somewhere around where he was standing when he went to talk to the law enforcement officer. I think at one point he was on the back of Harkness's motorcycle, perhaps. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that exactly right, but when he went to interact with the police officer, which was David Harkness, somehow that camera got left behind. And what a tragedy that is. Even if it didn't capture any of the action, just to, more photographs from that perspective and of the crowd and what was going on at that corner, and those would have just been, priceless. But I would encourage you to read through the Amos Ewan's statements, but for sure listen to that audio, because I just found that fascinating, and the fact that he had a camera with him, and the whole third floor from the top thing. Those are two really interesting things in that audio. So I'd encourage you to listen to that. So Robert Edwards, Ronald Fisher, and L.R. Terry. Yeah, Robert Edwards is interesting. He said, so he observed a man in the southeast corner window. And when I say the southeast corner window, and I'm not specifying a floor, that's because in many of these statements, that's a point of contention. Their statements are not always consistent about which, fifth or sixth floor they're talking about. So, if I phrase it that way, that's why I'm not specifying a floor, because sometimes that's part of the point here that we're talking about. That's the point of contention. But he observed a man in the southeast corner window just before the shots were fired, about the time the motorcade turned on to Elm. But here's the interesting, so his statements, I found three Robert Edwards, 3 times he's on the record. And in his first statement, he says that the shooter he witnessed was on the 5th floor. And on his next two, it changes to the 6th floor, which is not uncommon, right? You get that first initial statement is often, I think, more accurate before they start getting information well, there was a rifle found on the 6th floor, and before law enforcement starts managing some of these statements and trying to encourage these witnesses to talk about the 6th floor and not the 5th floor. And Edwards is a great example of that. He says, so 5th floor, 6th floor, and 6th floor are his 3 statements, right? But he says the window in question where the shooter was all the way open. And as we know, the window on the Oswald window on the 6th floor was not all the way open. It was open about a foot or so, maybe open about a third or halfway. So I think that's a significant point in Mr. Edwards' statements, is that the window in question was on was all the way open. So that had to be the 5th floor, not the 6th floor. But the other interesting thing about Edwards was he says that he stated in his Warren Commission testimony that the reason why he switched from saying the 5th floor to the 6th floor, he comes right out and says, well, the FBI convinced me that it was the 6th floor. So his initial utterance, his initial testimony was the shooter he observed was on the 5th floor. and he tells the Warren Commission, but then I talked to the FBI and they straightened me out and told me it was a 6th floor. So that's I think that's pretty fascinating. Ronald Fisher was also standing at that southwest corner of Houston and Elm. He observed a man in the southeast corner window for about 15 to 20 seconds until the first car turned onto Houston Street. The man was in a laying down position such that only his head was visible. He was looking down toward the triple underpass and stated that the Warren Commission, excuse me, tried to intimidate him into changing his testimony regarding the suspect's hair color. So he had mentioned that the suspect's hair color, he either said blonde or light sandy hair. I forget which description he gave, but it was much lighter than Oswald's. And he almost got into a fist fight with David Bellin because he would not change his testimony regarding Oswald's hair color. So again, all this stuff that I'm talking about, and maybe you have your own resources to look at these statements, but if you use that witness matrix, again, they're all linked, so you can go and read all this stuff for yourself. Because what I'm giving here, and that's, that's with these matrices that I put together and kind of the stuff we're talking about today. I mean, I know you guys are experienced in this stuff, so you know, like if we were going into detail about each one of these 75 statements, we would be here probably all weekend. So
let's do it.
Right on, Bart. So I'm hitting the highlights and points that I feel like are important, but yeah, just jump in and cut me off or ask if you want to hit something more in depth or whatever. So I'm, feel free to do that. So that's Ronald Fisher, right? He says that the FBI convinced him that it was the 6th floor, not the 5th floor, which I think is hilarious and sort of par for the course in this case. Excuse me. L.R. Terry. This is a person. I don't know who this is. I don't know what the L or the R stand for. I tried to figure out more about this, find this person, but it's been unable to find out any more information. I came across L.R. Terry in Jim Marr's Crossfire, and he just has a sentence or brief sentence or two on Terry. And again, if you go to the links on the matrix, which just linked you to my witness statement page on my website, that's the reference about where L.R. Terry, where I got that from, what page it's on, etc. It's all there. Mr. Terry, I say Mr. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. Terry observed a gun barrel and a hand on this barrel come out of a window of the Texas School Book Depository just after JFK passed by. There was another man with this gunman. He does not specify which window or which floor. So not a lot of help there, but another witness that saw something going on up there. We've got 17 witnesses on record that I could find. If you look at the photos of Houston Street and Elm Street and the corner, the intersection of the two, I have to believe there are far more than 17 people that saw something up there. Who knows how many of them did or didn't go on record, but so I'm sure there's more out there that I haven't found. There has to be. So not much to say about Terry, but again, just another person that saw something going on up in those windows. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Tony. So Ruby Henderson and James Worrell Jr. Ruby Henderson, excuse me, I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so that's the coughing and stuff. I apologize. I'm doing my best here with my voice. Ruby Henderson observed two men on one of the upper floors of the Texas School Book Depository sometime between 12:15 and when the motorcade reached Elm in Houston. They were looking out a window in anticipation of the motorcade. She gave two statements, and neither one of them did she specify a floor. So not a lot there with Ruby. She saw a couple of guys up there in an upper floor window, but not a lot there. But she did see some people up there. So not much with Ruby. Ruby Henderson, that is, not Jack Blake. James Worrell Jr. Was also, oh, I'm sorry, Henderson and James Worrell were directly below the southeast corner windows. So you can kind of, if you can make out that photograph there, that's Worrell marking his little X, you know, kind of where he was standing, and Ruby Henderson was somewhere in that same vicinity. Mr. Worrell is interesting. He says that he observed a short-barreled rifle sticking out of the southeast corner window, saw a muzzle flash and smoke from the rifle at the time of the second and third shots he heard. Worrell, there are four statements by Worrell that I could locate. The first three, he says fifth or sixth floor. Wasn't sure which one, fifth or sixth, and then his fourth one is unidentified, unspecified in terms of the floor. What's interesting, one of the interesting things about Mr. Worrell, he describes it as a short-barreled rifle, and there is one other witness, and I'm trying to find Carolyn Walther. Carolyn Walther, we'll get to her in a little bit. But in her description of the gunman she saw, she also described it as a short-barreled rifle. So I don't know what they consider short versus long. I just found it interesting that two witnesses who were located in two different places both described this rifle as short-barreled. So a little bit of corroboration that maybe they saw the same guy or the same rifle. Let's go to the next slide, please. And thanks for doing the slides for me, Tony. You're doing a better job than I probably would be doing, so I appreciate it.
Very welcome. Great.
Ruth Hallmark, you can see I've tried to do a little yellow box outline there on the Daltex building. Ruth Hallmark was, she worked in the Daltex building. She was looking out a window there. And, you know, it's funny, I don't know exactly. I think it's in her testimony somewhere. I'm not sure. I think it might have been the third floor of the Daltex. Yeah, I believe it was the third floor. But it's interesting. She's, you know, there's with the Altrins photo and all the speculation about what was going on in the Daltex and was there a shooter in there and what can you see in what window and whatever. I find it interesting. She said she's on the third floor of the Daltex, looking out the window, and she sort of had to forget how she put it, but you know, crane her neck or look, you know, lean out the window or something to kind of see. And you know, not only did she see what she saw regarding the Texas School Book Depository, but she was also like right there near the windows and that fire escape where we're all sort of wondering what was going on in the Daltex. Like if she was still alive and we had access to her, I would not only want to ask her about what she observed around the TSBD, but you know, around where she worked, right? If there was something going on in the Daltex, it was coming from one of those windows, possibly by where she was positioned. So it would be interesting to hear if she heard anything over there. But regardless, that's where she was in the Daltex, looking out the window. And what Ms. Hallmark says, she didn't see a person or a gun, but she saw smoke outside of either the fifth or sixth floor. I'm sorry, fourth or fifth floor. So she looked at the Texas School Book Depository after the first shot. She saw smoke near one of the fourth or fifth floor windows. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can rule the fourth floor out, right? There were a bunch of people on the fourth floor. I mean, so Dorothy Garner, girl on the stairs, that whole thing. There were those three women there. I think there were several other folks who worked in the offices of the Texas School Book Depository on the 4th floor, looking at the motorcade from those windows. So the possibility of a shooter being on the 4th floor, I think all those witnesses, all those folks there would preclude that. So when Ruth Hallmark says smoke around one of the 4th or 5th floor windows, I think it's almost got to be the 5th floor, because unless anyone thinks there could have been someone firing from the 4th floor, I don't see that as being possible. So I think kind of like was it Fisher? Edwards? No. The witness we just touched on from one of the earlier slides that said, it was the 5th or 6th floor, but the window was definitely all the way open. Well, that tells us it was the 5th floor, because the 6th floor window was not nearly all the way open. Similar with Ruth Hallmark, right? She says, I saw smoke around one of the 4th or 5th floor windows. Well, pretty unlikely it was a 4th floor window. So again, by process of elimination, we can conclude that must have been a 5th floor window. Next slide, please, Tony. Okay, the east side of Houston Street. James Crawford, Arnold Rowland, and Carolyn Walther. James Crawford, I'll have to look at my notes a little bit for Mr. Crawford. Mr. Crawford observed an object being withdrawn from the left side of the southeast corner window after the 3rd shot he heard. He later referred to this window as the far east window. And in both of his two statements, he identified the 6th floor. So I believe, there are, when we get to the conclusion section, which I think we'll try to get there in short order, I think that's kind of the most fun stuff to talk about, right? Because that's, well, what does all this stuff mean? Because we've got 17 witnesses. They don't exactly align with what they saw. And even if you look at any given witness's statements, if they gave multiple statements, some of them are consistent, some of them are not. Some of them have been filtered. It's not the witness telling us directly, it's the FBI saying, here's what this witness said, which, how much can you believe what the FBI says? So I think some of the instances where we have some direct, whether it's Warren Commission testimony or an audio recording or a YouTube video or a handwritten statement, I think some of those are some of the most fascinating interactions or statements we have from these guys, these folks. Anyway, James Crawford. James Crawford and Bob Jackson. Bob I think he's from Delhi. He's a member of the media riding in the press car. Those two guys, and again, we'll get to it in the conclusion, but those two guys of these 17 people said they saw pretty much exactly the official story, that they saw a gunman or a gun or suspicious activity in the southeast corner window of the 6th floor. They didn't equivocate or so those are the two witnesses of these 17 that sort of make that support the commission's version, the official version of the story. That it was one person is all they saw, and it was in the Oswald window. Arnold Rowland is, my gosh, this guy. So Brennan's on record 14 times that I could find, and I think Rowland is, Rowland's got 12. 12. He's on the record 12 different times that I could locate. Many of you are likely familiar with Arnold Rowland. I'll just kind of read a brief summary. Again, I'm just reading right off of this matrix. These are my attempts to summarize what these witnesses saw. So Arnold Rowland observed a white or Latin man with a rifle standing near the southwest corner window about 12:15. And it's different in a couple of his different statements, but in terms of in terms of how far back from the window this person was standing, but it was at least a few feet. He wasn't right up against the window, wasn't leaning out wasn't leaning out the window or right up at it. but about 12:15, about 15 minutes prior to shots fired, he saw a white or Latin man with a rifle standing near the southwest corner window. He also said he saw an elderly black man hanging out of the southeast corner window. That would have been the Oswald window, just prior to seeing the man with the rifle at the other end of the 6th floor. Rowland told DPD officer David Harkness that he saw a man on one of the upper floor windows walking around with a high-powered rifle. Rowland told Roger Craig that there was another man with the man holding the rifle and that they were walking back and forth. There's no mention of a pair of men together like this or walking around in any of Rowland's later statements, only in what Roger Craig said Rowland told him. So, and the idea of the elderly black man in the southeast corner window, that I believe only comes up in maybe one of his statements. So that Rowland is a little bit, you have to read through all of his statements to catch all this info, but the fact that there was a man with the gunman and they were walking around was only in the Roger Craig stuff. And the elderly black man in the southeast corner window, I believe, was only in one of his statements. So I'm not sure what it means, but I see I'm looking at John and I see his little box has a yellow thing around it. Does that mean anything? Okay, I thought maybe John had something he wanted to say, so I was going to shut up if he did. Nope. Tony? All good?
No, I think you're okay. I think what happens is if there's any sound, it comes up in yellow. So it could be those noise. That's all.
Okay, thank you. My technical not being tech savvy here, so yeah, just want to make sure.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay. So I think it's Arnold Rowland is fascinating in that 15 minutes before the assassination, he says he saw an elderly black man leaning out of the Oswald window. I think that's, I don't quite know what to make of that. He's the only witness that mentions something like that 15 minutes before the assassination. And the fact that he mentions this white or Latin gunman and someone who was with them, and they were walking around up there with a rifle 15 minutes prior to the assassination. That's the gist of what Arnold Rowland had to say. But he never.
Great.
Yeah.
Just a quick question: do you think that could be Piper, the elderly black man?
Yeah,
bald-headed guy that Ewan's,
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Neil. Because there was only really a couple of suspects who it could possibly be, right? An elderly black man. So, but to my, and I should probably know the answer to this, but I don't. But was he supposed to be on the first floor, or am I thinking of?
I think he was down by the elevators on the first floor, but
yeah. I'm not sure either, but I so it's a great question, Neil. I don't know the answer to it, but is Piper, and maybe I'm not sure how old Charles Givens was at the time.
Charles Givens was allegedly on another street a few blocks away, wasn't he? If I remember.
Okay.
If I recall. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct. I think Piper was
Piper was the janitor. He was the janitor, Bart, wasn't he?
Yeah. He said that he was looking through, those little squares they had in the front where the windows are. The bit you looked out of, Neil, when you visited there.
Yeah.
He basically claimed he was looking through that. which are little squares, probably about an inch or two
Yeah.
in width and height. And he said he followed it through that. But Piper was a terrible witness for the Warren Commission, because they even had to call him back in, actually drag him back in, when it comes to whether truly and the police officer came in the building and so forth. Yeah, so highly, you know what, being black in the 60s was not a good setting. You know, the Jim Crow laws were, I think, still in effect, or were just about to be canceled out, but that doesn't mean that the overall mentality had disappeared as well during that time. So they were scared.
Yeah, right on. And so that's interesting. So Neil, if we look at Rowland saying 15 minutes at 12:15, he saw an elderly black man leaning out the 6th floor southeast corner window. It does beg the question, right? Who was that? If it wasn't one of the TSBD employees that we can place there, and I don't think we can place any of them there, as we've been discussing, then who was it, right? Was it a dark-skinned Cuban? Was it somebody that had something to do with something up there? I don't know. I mean, if there was someone hanging out that window or in that window 15 minutes prior to the assassination, while on the west end of that same floor, there's 2 guys, one of them with a rifle, walking around. I mean, I don't know to exactly who it was or what was going on up there, but it does make an interesting question of it.
I think if it happened like it's being described by him as such, I would basically put that down to whoever was on that floor walked to the furthest end of the floor to see when the car was going to come down the corner from Maine towards Houston, because that would be a better angle to look at when the car was actually supposed to arrive.
That's right.
If big word, if.
Yeah, a lot of ifs for sure. Yep. And to your point,
just to throw in some speculation, what about that guy Del Valle?
Oh, Eladio Del Valle. Yeah. Interesting.
He looks quite balding-ish, doesn't he?
Well,
and he died the same day as Ferry, didn't he?
Yeah. Fascinating, Neil. And I've wondered that too, because and I know Amos Ewans, and I'm not sure if there was another witness, but one of the interesting things, if you read through all the Ewans stuff, is he talks about, and I think when he gets to the Warren Commission, they finally straighten it out, because in some of the earlier FBI reports, he talks about, or at least in one of them, he talks about a white man being the character that he saw with firing a rifle. And he clarifies this finally with the Warren Commission. He said, no, I didn't say white man. I said he had a white spot or a light spot on his head, which my whole head is a big white spot. But so a light spot or a white spot on his head makes me think, I don't know, is that a receding hairline? Was the guy bald? Did he have a bald spot? We don't know. And that's one of the things I'd love to ask Mr. Ewans if I could ever have the chance to talk to him. But it made me think of that, Tony. It made me think of Eladio Del Valle. I don't have any proof or evidence that he was there, but he's one of the suspects we talk about in this case. As you mentioned, he's murdered the same day as Ferry. He certainly moved in the right circles to have been involved with these guys. And when you look at him, yeah, he's got hair like mine. So he could have possibly fit that description of Mr.
There is a photo, isn't there, of the southwest corner of the 5th or 6th, I guess, but I can't remember, where there is a so-called image of someone that is either bald or has got a crew cut.
So a photo of one of the southwest corner.
Southwest corner of the 5th or the 6th.
Huh.
It's either Powell or Reed, or I don't know, maybe not Reed, but
if there is, it's
Dillard or Powell, and you can, allegedly there is a image of somebody in the southwest corner with some kind of a receding hairline or bald.
Interesting. Well, that would certainly fit. That would certainly fit with what Mr. Ewan said he saw in the southeast corner window. I mean, it could have been the same guy.
Yeah.
I'm not.
But help me out here. You must have seen that photo.
He must be taking a break.
You must have walked away from this machine.
Yeah, I have that effect on people when I talk.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. I've got all the Groden books here. I'll look over there in a minute.
Yeah, right on. Okay. But yeah, that, so Arnold Rowland poses some really interesting or opens up some really interesting, couple really interesting lines of inquiry, including who this black guy or dark skinned guy was in that Oswald window 15 minutes before shots fired. Carolyn Walther, also on the east side of Houston Street. She's pretty interesting too. Excuse me. Carolyn says that she saw a man, again, just like James Worrell, with a short-barreled rifle in the southeast corner window and another man next to him just prior to the motorcade turning onto Houston Street. She stated she was, quote, positive this window was not as high as the 6th floor, unquote. She stated the FBI tried to convince her what she saw were just boxes and that they were trying to prove her out to be a liar. So she was very, obviously I never met Carolyn Walther, but I'd love to talk to her because the way that the FBI she wasn't being fooled by what the FBI was trying to do in terms of steering her testimony and what she saw or didn't see. She knew exactly what she saw. She told them that, and when they tried to steer her toward the 6th floor, she pushed right back. And then there's again on the in the matrix, if you look at her statements, I'm sorry, Ms. Walther, we have her on record 3 times that I could locate. 4th or 5th floor was her initial statement. 4th or 5th floor was her second statement, and unspecified floor on her third statement. So again, she says she knows it was not as high as the 6th floor. And I think we can rule out the 4th floor since there were lots of people observing the motorcade from the 4th floor. So again, process of elimination, the only possibility, she says 4th or 5th, it has to be the 5th floor. And there is on my website under Carolyn Walther, under her statements, I believe one of them is a YouTube video, and which I think that kind of stuff's always fascinating because you're getting it directly from her, right out of her mouth, not filtered through an FBI report or a Dallas police report or anything like that. So I think that's pretty interesting. Can we go to the next one, Tony? So in a car within the presidential motorcade, there were Malcolm Couch, Bob Jackson, and riding in this car. And Mal Couch observed a rifle barrel being withdrawn from the southeast corner window after the 3rd shot he heard. He stated the window in question was all the way open. So another guy, the window in question was all the way open, which confirms that this window in question was the 5th floor, not the 6th. He saw at least 2 black men on the 3rd or 4th floor looking up toward the next floor. So in Mr. Couch's statements, he says, in his first one, 5th or 6th floor, second one, 5th or 6th floor, third statement, 6th or 7th floor, and then unspecified in the next one, in his last 2. So his first 2 statements, he identifies the gunman as being on the 5th or the 6th floor, but states the window in question was all the way open. So again, we know the 6th floor southeast corner window was not all the way open. It was only partially open. So if it's a choice between the 5th or the 6th floor, southeast corner window, and you're telling me that the witness is saying the window in question is all the way open, it has to be the 5th floor. Bob Jackson, company line all the way. His statement was that it was, let's see, he observed a rifle barrel being withdrawn from the southeast corner window after the 3rd shot he heard. This window was about half open. Stated he saw 2 black men looking out the windows on the floor directly below the gunman. So, and he identifies the 6th floor in all of his statements, except the last one, in which case he was not specific about the floor. So Bob Jackson, pretty much his statement aligns with the official story all the way through. So not much more to say about Mr. Jackson. And again, it's in our conclusion slide, which we'll get to here pretty soon. In these statements, the best support are Crawford and Jackson in terms of the official story. Those are the only 2 guys, that were clear about it was a 6th floor window, the 6th floor southeast corner window.
Jackson got a Pulitzer Prize, so
Right.
all is forgiven. So
Yeah.
Maybe the other guy got something in return as well. But I find Jackson's and Couch's story very hard to believe, because as a photographer, you go where the action is. And when you see somebody pull a barrel back in the building,
Right.
I know we're talking hindsight here, but they went down the road all the way to the triple overpass, whatever, all the way in the car, knowing that the shooter was in the building, and yet not get out the car. But Darnell gets out the car,
Right.
and Couch, because they were sitting next to each other, Darnell, Couch, and Jackson. Darnell gets out of the car and runs down there. They drive down there as well. But if you know and see that there's a shooter, you have confirmation, visual confirmation, and the cop was standing. Darnell went past the cop on the left-hand side. You would have said, "Yo, man, there's a shooter up in the building over there." That would have been the first thing. And then none of it happens. And they get out the car at the underpass and walk back and still don't open their gobs mouth.
Yeah.
So nothing's happening. So this is my problem with it. And maybe they did see it, maybe they were in shock, and and all this stuff. And he got a very handy Pulitzer Prize. But
you're right though, Bart. I mean, if you're a photographer or a reporter, I mean that's what you do. Your instinct isn't to jump out and go to that building as you pass it, right? I mean, it's got to be, but they don't do it. So
the car was already long gone.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Right.
The limo.
And if you just saw a rifle barrel being, I mean, if you actually saw that and you're passing it right there, I mean, and you're a reporter or a photographer, right? I mean, your instincts are going to be screaming at you to jump out of that car, but they don't. So I don't know why, but does it make sense? Not really.
One more thing. The Dillard photo, I posted a link of the close-up in the chat bit. The thing is, with the Dillard photo, as a photographer, I cannot reconcile the quality of the 3 people that look like they've been inserted. So if you scroll up in the chat box, that goes for everyone, scroll up, look at it, and see how beautiful it looks. It's too beautiful. It's a very good darkroom technician from a darkroom point of view, because I have experience with darkrooms.
Yeah.
Those black holes, basically, which are basically the windows, the black backdrops, they look too beautiful. Scroll it down a bit, Tony. You're looking at the 6th floor window. I want to look at the 5th floor window.
A little bit more.
Scroll down. On the right hand, oh, no, I can't see it. Can you scroll down on the bar? Yes, right. Bit more, please. Right. So look at, especially the one on the left. Now it could be dodging in darkroom, but the bottom line is that they look perfectly inserted as such. There's something amiss about the quality in conjunction with the images. And in a darkroom, an area like that is the perfect area to basically insert someone with a double exposure. Now, I'm not saying they weren't there and this, that, and the other. I'm not complaining. But what that picture shows is just simply amazing from a quality point of view. They would have looked a lot less clear if they had been into that area as such, because yet they're in there beautifully.
Yeah.
And also, if you compare this with the image of the color images and so forth, there's never three people. And if you look at the Polaroid, the Viva Polaroid, it looks like there's two people in one window.
Yeah.
That's another problem. So it's very hard to reconcile this photograph. I mean, somebody brought up that it was faked as such. I don't know. But this is also the same picture where everyone sees the ghost in the windows next to the so-called sniper's nest. Yet the top half is there, a ghost, and then the under half, the bottom half, has got nothing in it as such. I can't reconcile any of it. As a photographer, I just can't reconcile any of it.
Bart, and I'm that's a great photo. Thank you for sharing it.
I will email you the whole print. It was scanned in Nara. It's massive, because in the one that I've got from Nara, you can see the guy on the third floor, Stephen Wilson, on the third floor, standing up and looking through the window as well.
Yeah, right on.
Stephen Wilson is a very interesting character, because he said, like, it is a conspiracy because I know where the bullets came from, and he basically was aiming towards Daltex. So, and this is another thing for your witnesses, where the shots came from. You want to look into Patricia. The name just eludes me. She was standing in the front row with the people of all the TSBD people, all the staff was there. Carolyn Arnold was there. If you look at Wegman, while Wegman is filming the front, there are people in front, and Patricia and Carolyn Arnold are standing there. There's a moment where Carolyn Arnold looks completely to the left into the direction of the Daltex building. Yeah. During the shooting, because Wegman got out before the third shot actually was fired as such, as per his interview he did with Richard Trask. And there's another bit where Patricia is being interviewed by Max Holland. And no one realizes that when she's basically talking about it, where the shots came from, she points and looks to the Daltex building. And no one is actually Patricia, what's her name? Fucking hell. Nobody understands, like, oh, hold on a minute. She's right there in the middle, and she points. She doesn't point up. She points to the Daltex building as such.
Yeah,
that was quite a thing.
And I don't have names, because I really didn't focus too much on the ear witnesses, and I know there's been lots of work done on that. You know, where do you, based on what you heard, where do you think they came from? There were several witnesses based on what they thought they heard that would support fire from the Daltex. So yeah, and that's whenever we talk about the Ruth Hallmark, the lady who was on the third floor of the Daltex and saw smoke in front of the one of the windows of the TSBD. I just always think how fascinated I would be to talk to her, to find out not so much about the smoke, but what she saw and heard in the Daltex. That's such so much more of a black hole than the TSBD, even though the TSBD is still, we're still trying to untangle what the heck went on in that building. We know far, far less about what was going on in the Daltex.
Yeah, Patricia Ann Lawrence, that's her name. When you look at the close-up of the Wegman shot, you can she's standing there with a black scarf right in the middle of it. And I really hope to find this bit of video. I uploaded it.
I'll look her up, Bart. Thank you. That's good information. Appreciate it. I was
laughing my ass off when I saw that bit when she's pointing to the Daltex. I was like, get the hell out of here. This is just an absolute joke. And it was brilliant.
Of course, she was probably called to testify, right?
No.
I was being facetious. Of course not, right? Yeah.
Just like Carolyn Arnold, you know, same
Carolyn
thing.
Arnold and the folks from
Carolyn
the,
Arnold is still alive.
she
That's
is?
the thing. Yeah. There's quite a few Texas School Book Depository ladies that are still alive.
That's fascinating. I would,
You live in Texas.
yeah, yeah.
Where?
Just like Amos Ewans. I mean, wouldn't it be fascinating if somebody down there was skillful enough to be able to pull a few of those folks that are still around together for a chat, you know, just to not to challenge them or beat them up about anything, just to clarify and make sure we understand exactly what they saw. Because after reading through and listening to Amos Ewans, you know, I still have a few questions. Not that I'm questioning what he says, but I just want to make sure I'm clear and have a good understanding of some of the aspects that are a little bit ambiguous, or that he isn't quite specific enough. I'd love to talk to him about. But yeah, it'd be fascinating to talk to those folks. But I don't know. So far, my efforts in that area have been come up dry. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So Bobby Johnson and Johnny Powell. There's an article, and we'll talk about Powell first, but that I got that name from an article that Earl Goltz, I think, wrote. Yeah. So that's the only reference I found to Johnny Powell and him giving a statement. He says he observed two men fooling around with a scope on a rifle on the 6th floor window, in the 6th floor window, about 12:24 p.m. Stated he looked at this same window when the shooting started and it was empty. So he's saying the Oswald window, the 6th floor window, about 6 minutes before shots fired, saw two guys in that window fooling around with a scope on a rifle. So when I read that, if that's true, you know, that to me says that maybe those were the guys, right, that were going to plant the shells and hide that rifle up there. Perhaps those were the guys that were efforting to frame Oswald with that with the rifle and shells up there. And then Johnny Powell, also located in the jail. I'm sorry, Bobby, we talked about Powell. Bobby Joe Johnson observed a window being raised on the west end of the Texas School Book Depository building as the motorcade passed. He saw a man stick his head out along with what appeared to be a rifle. He stated he was positive the window in question was on the west end of the building. He did not specify a floor. And I find that interesting. I didn't include it in this presentation. It was included in my Lancer talk last year. I kind of speculated about Herminio Diaz Garcia. It's a name I think most of you guys probably know. Australian researcher James Richards. I don't know how many of you know James. He hasn't been around the case for a while, but he's a guy with a pretty interesting set of contacts and a pretty interesting background himself. He spoke to members of the Diaz family and to some folks who knew Herminio Diaz back in the day. And what James tells me that those folks were told, that the family was told, and I don't know told by who, told by Diaz himself or who, I'm not sure. But the word amongst the Diaz Garcia's family and associates from back then was that he was on, and depending on who you talk to, the 5th or the 6th floor, and that he fired from a window near the west end of the building. And he's a Latin, he's a Cuban, dark-skinned guy. So there's no, I guess, proof or corroboration. It's sort of hearsay, right? It's what these people say they were told by people that know and that kind of thing. So it doesn't prove anything, but I find it interesting that Bobby Johnson's observation was a window near the west end. That caught my attention and made me wonder if that could have been the Diaz Garcia. It aligns with the stuff that I've heard about Herminio Diaz Garcia. So doesn't prove it was him or mean it was him, but I think it's an interesting. We're getting similar information from him as we got from Diaz Garcia's people, or the people around Herminio Diaz Garcia. So that being a window near the west end. So 2 guys in the jail, and I know there's been I know some researchers have done some work on these jail witnesses and which window they would have been in, and could they have seen what they claimed they saw from the cell they were in, and so on. And I'm not an expert in that aspect of it. So we will talk about the credibility of, we talked about the credibility of Brennan, and we're going to talk about Richard Carr, and he's got there's some credibility questions there too. So as I go through these, I guess I'm not vouching for the credibility of all these witnesses. I'm merely relaying to you guys, or to anyone who cares, what they stated they saw. And I think some of them, like Amos Ewan's, are highly, highly credible. Other ones like Brennan and Richard Carr, well, Brennan is not credible at all. Carr, I think I'm on the fence, and we'll talk about that. But so these guys, I'm taking them at their word. I can't prove that they saw what they said they saw, but these are their statements, and you can make of them what you will. But let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay, Richard Carr, right. So you can see the little yellow box, right? He was on depending on which statement of his you read, the 6th or the 7th floor of some scaffolding that was up outside of this courthouse building. So he was about 2 blocks away on scaffolding, 6 or 7 stories up outside the building. And Mr. Carr, this little summary I have of what he saw was difficult to write because it changed quite a bit. So what Mr. Carr, my little summation of what he saw: observed a man shooting from a Texas school book depository window, which he later clarified as having seen only a man, but no gun and no one shooting. Stated the suspect was not in, stated the suspect was, quote, not in the end window next to Houston Street, but I believe in the second window over from Houston Street, unquote. Later, he stated the man was in the third window. Multiple accounts of intimidation and threats by the FBI against, multiple accounts of intimidation and threats by the FBI, by FBI agents in his Clay Shaw trial testimony and in an interview recounted in books by Gary Shaw and Jim Mars. So Carr, what's interesting about him is most of the stuff we have, like he initially said this activity he saw was on the 7th floor, which takes me aback, right? I have the 7th floor. No, I mean, that's he's the only person I believe who indicated there was something going on up on the 7th floor. What I find really interesting about him is when we get to the Garrison trial. I think that was in 67 or 68. Again, in my list of witness statements with Carr, that his transcript of his testimony in the Clay Shaw trial is up there. But so we've got him saying the 7th floor in these FBI reports. And then when he gets to the late 60s and he gets into the Shaw trial, he says 5th floor, which so I would have been fascinated if Jim Garrison would have asked him, well, in these, why does it say 7th? Why does it say that the suspicious activity you observed was on the 7th floor in these reports to law enforcement? And here you're under oath on the stand, you're telling me it was the fifth floor. Can you explain that? That was never asked, so we don't know. But I find it interesting that in these reports to law enforcement, he states that the suspicious activity he observed was on the 7th floor. But we get him on the stand under oath directly in the late 60s, and he says 5th floor. So I can't explain why that is, but I think it's interesting. And I think the 5th floor keeps coming up over and over and over again. So pretty fascinating. But, you know, he's 2 blocks away. And let me go to my other matrix here, the suspect description matrix. And let me read a little bit about, oh, well, so Carr, he talks about seeing, again, the first FBI report states that he was talking to a neighbor or a lady friend and talked about seeing a shooter and a gun. And then in his later statements, the shooter and the gun disappear. And he just saw, he talks about a guy that had glasses, I think with a thick frame, and he had a brown or tan sport coat on. And he describes this guy, what he was wearing and what he, his glasses in such detail where you think, well, could he have possibly seen that level of detail from 2 blocks away? I don't know the answer to that, but he does talk about seeing this man, this guy in the sport coat, exit the building after the shots and come down Houston Street toward him. And I think the man walks to Commerce and goes down Commerce. But Carr actually follows him. I don't know if he follows him physically or just with his eyes, but he sees him coming up the street toward him. And I've often wondered if maybe trying to give Mr. Carr the benefit of the doubt, if he saw something in those windows, as stated in his statements that we're talking about, if he saw something and maybe it was only when that guy came out of the building, he thought, hey, that looks like the guy I saw up in the windows. And as the guy got closer to him, maybe he was able to pick out certain details about his glasses or his coat or whatnot, and provide that description to us. So if you read through Richard Carr's statements, I think he also saw some dark-skinned guys get into a Rambler, come out, exit the rear of the book depository and get into a Rambler on Houston. And as I mentioned, he witnessed this guy in the brown sport coat, suit coat, come down Houston to Commerce. And I think he followed him again. I don't know if it was physically or followed him with his eyes, but saw him get into a car. I don't remember what if that was a Rambler or not, but we have a number of Ramblers around the plaza involved in suspicious activity. So that's Richard Carr, and he's another one. So I would, Brennan and Ewans and Carr to me were some of the more fascinating testimonies to read through. Carr really, it's his Clay Shaw trial transcript that I find pretty interesting. And just one of the things I forgot to mention about Brennan, bringing him up, as much of a train wreck as he was, they wanted him to testify before the HSCA, and he refused to do it. He said, if you subpoena me, I'll fight it. I'll get my doctor to say it would be bad for my health, which I thought was funny, right? It might be bad for his health. All right. But I just found it interesting that he told them, good luck. I'm not saying another word about it. So subpoena me all you want. So I thought that was an interesting thing about Brennan too. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the unknown mystery man, right? The the guy who provided the initial that description that went out over the DPD radio, the initial suspect description, and you read Sawyer's Warren Commission testimony, and for an inspector, police inspector, he was not very observant. Apparently, he has no idea what this guy was, what he looked like. I forget the way he worded it, but if you read Sawyer's Warren Commission testimony, if you haven't read it, and you guys probably have, But if you haven't, man, it's worth a read. He was right in the middle of all these initial witnesses coming forward, and these cops who were right there at Houston and Elm talking about what they saw. I think it's Sawyer's testimony where he said the first reports that he was getting from people inside the Texas School Book Depository were that there was that the shots came from the 5th floor. And I think, if memory serves, he talks about either shells or a weapon or something. I think it was shells being found on the 5th floor. So, and I believe he states that information was coming from people inside the depository, which I assume he means other policemen. But Sawyer's fascinating. So even if you forget about the witnesses and all the stuff we're talking about, reading Sawyer's Warren Commission testimony is a pretty interesting time. But so this is and I think a lot of us, I think you guys, what I think this guy was very likely or very possibly just a plant to try to give a description that was something like Oswald, to sort of put him on that scent. But I don't know that, but just total speculation. But anyway, this guy, this unknown witness, this is an unknown white male who provided the description to Inspector Sawyer of the suspect he observed firing from the 5th floor. And that's, I think somewhere in Sawyer's testimony, he says 2 different things. I think at one point he might say 6th or 5th or 6th in terms of what this guy told him. But if you look on page 9 of Sawyer's testimony, when they pin him down and say, what floor was this? He says the 5th floor. So this unknown white male who provided the initial suspect description to Sawyer says he saw this guy firing from the 5th floor. Page 9 of Sawyer's testimony. Sawyer broadcast this description over the police radio at 12:44 p.m. Quote, "The person wanted in the shooting is a slender white male, about 30, 5 feet 10, 165 pounds, carrying what looks to be a 30-30 or some type of Winchester," unquote. So that's this unknown character. But Sawyer didn't remember what he looked like, what he was wearing, didn't remember a thing about the guy, which pretty interesting for a police inspector, I think. But so I think if we can go to the next slide, that kind of wraps up the brief summary, if you can call that brief, of these 17 witnesses. And these next 2 slides, when we're looking at here in the next one, just kind of break it down a little bit. The initial statements of these 17 people, 10 of them saw a rifle, or I say object because Amos Ewan's described it as a pipe, a rifle or an object in action. So firing, being drawn back into the window, some type of movement or action. 10 of the 17 people described seeing a rifle or object in action. 3 people described seeing a rifle or an object at rest. When I say at rest, I mean, like Arnold Rowland, he saw a guy standing there or walking around with a rifle, not pointing it or firing it or sticking it out of the window. 3 people saw a person, suspicious person or suspicious people only, no weapon. And then 1, Ruth Hallmark, just saw smoke. Next slide, please. And then this is the one I find a little even more interesting. So in terms of what floor they saw this person or suspicious activity on, again, based on their initial statements, and some of these changed over time, what they said they saw, or which floor they said they saw it on. So an initial statement. You have 4 people saying that what they saw took place on the 6th floor. 1 person, that's Carr, talking about the 7th floor in his initial statement. Unspecified 4 people. 4th or 5th floor, 2 people. 5th floor, 4 people. 5th or 6th floor, 2 people. So it just kind of helps break, it's a little all over the board. And this kind of helps just, yeah, I guess what it illustrates to me is that there are 6 people that say 5th floor or 5th or 6th, I'm sorry, 8 people who say it's possibly the 5th floor, right? Those 3 pie slices on your left, 5th or 6th floor, 2 people, 5th floor, 4 people, 4th or 5th floor, 2 people. That's 8 people total of the 17 who say the action was on the 5th floor or possibly the 5th floor. And yeah, so.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand is that when you go up the steps at the front of the Texas School Book Depository, you're on the 1st floor.
Right.
So the discrepancy can be accounted for that to insert. I'm not saying all of the instances, but a lot of people don't understand because they think like the ground floor, the pavement in front of the steps is ground floor. And there's nothing, because when you go up those steps, you're actually on the 1st floor. The entire level of that, like the area where they're packing basically the books and sending them out as parcels to whatever destination, that may feel and look like the ground floor. It isn't. The actual building itself had a basement and it had no ground floor and it had the 1st floor. Therefore, some of the sightings can be, and which they will, of course, if it were coming to some kind of investigation, they will say a lot of people are wrong because they don't understand that there is no ground floor level inside the Texas School Book Depository as such. It is a 1st floor.
Yeah, it's a good point, Bart. Which is why I think it's Amos Ewan's is just so important and so interesting and just important in the way he phrases that. When you listen to that audio and he says 3rd window from the top, right? There's no mistake in that. I mean,
yeah.
So I think that's a so you're exactly right. And in terms of just, this was a traumatic event that popped off in just a few seconds. And so the possibility of being mistaken, right? You count wrong, or you only saw it for a few seconds. So which floor really was it? All, I mean, good points and certainly possibilities that people were mistaken or didn't count right. Which is why I think it's important to understand and look at, there were 17 people. So could a person be mistaken? Absolutely. Or a couple of people, or maybe somebody else kind of wanted to insert themselves into the story and didn't really see as much as they said they saw. But I think for me, it's important that we have 17 people. So the idea that all of them, right, that all of them are mistaken, or that all of them miscounted, or, so it's the totality of these witnesses and the number of people that saw activity or something suspicious happening on what they say was the 5th floor, or possibly the 5th floor, is interesting. It's if we had 1 or 2 people saying that, I think it would be easier for me to be skeptical, or I am skeptical. It would be easier for me to sort of discount that as well. They were confused, and I think too, the other thing is the information on Oswald and finding the rifle on the 6th floor came out it was public pretty quickly. I don't know the exact time the first report came out over the radio or the TV, but it was not long after shots fired. I want to say it maybe was within the hour. So you wonder too about some of these witnesses who, they saw something, no matter what floor they thought it was on or what the guy looked like. And then they start hearing these reports about Oswald on the 6th floor, and you wonder if that didn't influence some of the statements that they gave, because, it popped off in a few seconds. So maybe they initially thought they knew what they saw, or they did know what they saw, and then they hear these reports and they think, well, okay, geez, it must have been the 6th floor then, because that's where the cops found the rifle. So I think there could be some of that going on here too.
Could I just say something, please?
Can I just make a couple of points about the 5th floor? And we discussed this a little bit before in some of our email correspondence as well. If there was somebody on the 5th floor, it's slightly quicker to get down, which is the point that you raised. before. You know, it's seconds, but seconds could be critical.
Yeah.
In terms of the southeast corner, they're slightly lower, so the big oak tree and the gantry is in the way there. Perhaps it could disrupt a shot from the southeast corner. So that would be a negative, perhaps, for a shot on the southeast corner of the 5th floor. I listened to Mary Hollis. She was a 4th floor employee, whatever the name of the company was, Foreman something, I can't remember. Which is at the 6th floor museum. She claimed to be on the 5th floor. With her colleague, which really blew my mind.
Who was that, Neil?
Mary Hollis.
I did not know. I was not aware of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it could be absolute bullshit because there was a couple of other things that she said in her interview for the 6th floor museum that were just strikingly wrong. But there was some other stuff that was really intriguing. But I don't know if she's trying to insert herself after the event and blah, blah, blah. But she claimed to be on the 5th floor. And the other point I wanted to make is, do you know a researcher called Thurman Lee Storing? Have you come across this chap before?
No, I have not.
Okay, so he's got a website. You have, but okay, it's not particularly populated. It's called In Search of Veritas.
Okay.
And he does some analysis of the Tom Alia footage, the guy that was inside the TSBD. Allier. So he does some analysis of that footage, and there is some film which he, through his analysis, is on the 5th floor southwest corner of the TSBD, and not the 6th floor, which was his original assertion. He was obviously doing some research to validate that. And very interesting, there's a bottle, two windows in, on the southwest corner of the 5th floor, there's an empty bottle on the window ledge.
Fascinating.
So if you're strongly inclined that a lot of this shit and activity was going on in the 5th floor, and we know that there is southwest 5th floor, corner sightings. I mean, maybe that the stuff was going on that side. And it's also complicated because the 3 black guys allege that they all ran over to the west side, didn't they?
Yeah, Neil, I'll tell you, and those 3 black guys, they've all passed away long ago. There are some
Bonnie Ray Williams as well.
What's that?
Bonnie Ray Williams is gone.
Yeah. At least the best I could find. I found a Bonnie Ray Williams. I forget what year he passed away, and I think it's the same guy. There are some researchers, I'm not one of them, that do some really good work on some of these genealogy sites, tracking people down. They find obituaries and they figure out, that this person had a wife that's still alive or a kid or whatever. Finding, I've been pretty unsuccessful in trying to talk to people like Amos Ewans. I would be absolutely fascinated to talk to anybody who was close to Williams, Norman, or Jarman back in the day, a friend, a kid, a surviving whatever. If my suspicions are correct, if our suspicions, I guess I can probably include you guys in this too, that their statements are a train wreck. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you exactly what happened on the 5th floor, but I know those guys are lying their butts off. And I just find it, if there was something like we think really nefarious happening on the 5th floor, in my opinion, there's no way all 3 of these guys carried that the rest of their days and never said a word to anybody. I mean, I don't know, maybe they were so scared they didn't, but I would love to talk to, if we could find a kid, a neighbor, a surviving spouse, something to just say, what do these guys say about it?
Well, of course, also Jack Doughty was supposed to be on the 5th.
Yeah, right. I mean,
just to throw that into the mix,
and Rob Clark said something to me. We were talking about this about Doherty, and he mentioned something, and I have not been able to find support for it. And we were both actually looking for something to support this, but Rob thought that the fifth floor, and correct me if this is incorrect, if you think this is wrong, but he thought the fifth floor on the day of the assassination was fairly deserted because they had just laid some of that new floor, so that the sight lines between where the stairs were and the windows, and would Doherty have been able to see Jarman, Norman, and Williams, and they have been able to see him, and so on. Rob's thought was that unlike the sixth floor, that there weren't boxes stacked up everywhere across the floor, and the sight lines would have been fairly clear. I don't know that to be the case. I haven't seen any photographs or testimony that would support that, but Rob seems to think that's the case. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I found that I think that's an interesting point, and it would be nice to be able to find a witness statement or in a perfect world, a photo that would corroborate that or shoot it down and say, no, that wasn't the case. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that, but.
I just want to bring in Richard here. I know you've got a question, Richard. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I've always found it rather strange looking at the exterior of the Texas School Book Depository building in terms of the unique characteristics of the sort of fenestration, the window layout, and the amount of reliance that can be placed on people's eyewitness testimony trying to determine which floor they saw something on. Because there is only one floor on the TSBD that has that unique characteristic of the five round-headed windows in between, in the center of that facade. So I would have thought in terms of locating a window, if you'd seen activity on the sixth floor, you would be able to lock it in by the fact that it was the window directly next to a round-headed window. There's none of the other floors have that characteristic. How come no one ever mentioned that?
Yeah, it's a great
strange
point.
To me.
Yeah, it's a great point, Richard. I don't know. It seems like an obvious thing to mention, right? Or an obvious reference to bring up when you're trying to describe which window you might have seen something in.
That would sort of lock it into your memory, wouldn't it? You would think.
It would indeed, and I think to follow up on that, I believe it was Amos Ewan's in his initial statement that he gave was to DPD Officer David Harkness. In, I believe it's Harkness's Warren Commission testimony. There is some back and forth between the Warren Commission attorney and Harkness about the interaction Harkness had with Ewans. And as Harkness was describing to the Warren Commission what Ewans told him, the questioner was unclear, or it wasn't clear what floor this was on. And so Harkness is trying to describe it. And then finally the questioner, the attorney, says, well, what did he actually say? Like what were his exact words about what window it was or what floor it was, or words to that effect? And Harkness said, well, he said it was the window under the ledge, and we counted it and determined it was the fifth floor, or words to that effect. And then later I figured out it was the sixth floor because that's what's under the ledge. That's the window under the ledge, is the sixth floor. I probably made a little bit of a mess of that, but if you read Harkness's Warren Commission testimony, that's the gist of it. And what's interesting is if you look at that building, kind of like Richard was saying, there's some unique characteristics about that facade. So there's the big ledge between the seventh floor and the sixth floor. There's a big ledge there. But if you look at the fifth floor windows, there's in between each fifth floor window, there's the little ledge. You see that little ledge there? So it's actually when Harkness says Ewans told him the window right below the ledge, that's kind of ambiguous, right? He could mean the sixth floor or the fifth floor. Because there's a ledge above both of them. And I don't feel like I'm doing it justice by the way I'm describing it, but in Harkness's Warren Commission testimony, you read through that, and it becomes clear that, again, Ewan's third window from the top, and Harkness even says, like, he points, and again, I'm paraphrasing, so don't hold me to this exact quote, but Harkness basically says he pointed to the window, or he told me the window, or whatever, and then I counted, and it was Harkness who determined it was the sixth floor by his counting of those windows. But it sounds like what Ewan's actually told him was the window below the ledge, which could have been the sixth floor or the fifth floor.
I think to Richard's point, I mean, pre the actual shots, I can't imagine any witnesses really focusing on arched windows, square windows, architraving, ledges. You know, I mean, possibly after the assassination, you might be a little bit more alert. But if you're just standing in the street looking up, I mean, you know, and you think you see some person in, you know, in a window, I think that's very, very difficult to determine where that is.
100%.
I mean, yeah, and even less so counting the number of floors. I think that's even less likely. I think.
Well, the whole,
you know,
to Bart's point, the whole basement, raised steps, first floor issue. I mean, that complicates matters, doesn't it? You know.
And
we have to accept. We also have to accept that everyone's American, because, of course, had any of the eyewitnesses been of European origins, they may well have. You know, we've got a different floor numbering system, haven't we? With ground floor, first floor, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they just whoever the witnesses that saw suspicious activity, you know, my guess is, right, they probably saw whatever they saw, and then after the fact went back when they figured out that something important just happened, maybe then tried to go back and remember, okay, which window was that, and, you know, then started to try to count and figure it out. But yeah.
But were they ever taken back there? These witnesses, were they taken back before their FBI affidavits? Were they taken back to, or was it all happening in an office somewhere in a police station?
So I believe they were taken to, some of them were taken to the DPD offices, and then some were taken to the Dallas County Sheriff's offices to give their statements. But you know, what's interesting is we've been talking a lot about Jarman, Norman, and Williams. Those guys were involved in a reenactment, and you know, you guys have probably all seen the photos of those reenactments of those. So those three guys were taken back there. But as far as the other witnesses, I don't believe so. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't think so. I think they were interviewed in the police offices, in the Dallas County Sheriff's office. Gary, did I see?
I didn't know they were a part of the reenactment. That's news to me, that those guys. I mean, I know they were photographed and racially profiled as such, because no white person was photographed. It was only the black people. The black people were on the first floor and the fifth floor were photographed. No one else was photographed. So if that's part of the reenactment, so be it. I didn't know.
Well, I'll tell you, Bart, and I'm not, this photo is great. I've seen it before. But I always figure it's such a good, because you can see the faces of these guys. I just always figured it was part of those reenactment photos, but apparently
I'll send you a 100 meg version.
Yeah, that'd be, thanks, man. But yeah, there's some, and I think they're even on my website under the Texas School Book Depository photo page, I think. But they're Warren Commission exhibits. You can find them on the internet. But there's some pretty good photos of those guys from inside the fifth floor.
Yeah, the Warren Commission said.
Yeah. So that's man, I wish we had. Oh, so I know what I wanted to. One of the things, and you guys, you can laugh at me if you want on this. One of the things that got me, you know, so I'm, as you guys can probably tell, right, and we'll get to it here in a minute in the conclusions, but one of my big takeaways from this is that the stuff that there was real stuff going down on the fifth floor, and probably a shooter or shooters. And as I'm reading Jarman, Norman, Williams, Doherty's statements and shaking my head going, these guys are full of crap. Around the time I was trying to make sense of all that several years ago, I read John Armstrong article where he speculated, and I think this is on my website somewhere too, under the articles and essays, I believe. He's got the passenger elevator that went from 1 to 4.
Yeah.
He says that this just caught my attention, that there would have been a room on the 5th floor. So on the floor above the highest floor the elevator went to, the elevator only went to 4. So right above it on 5, there would have been the machinery, right? The pulleys and cables and some sort of maintenance room. to be able to gain access to that elevator from the 5th floor, right through like a top panel on the ceiling of the elevator. And he speculates that and he was talking about, well, if there was shots fired from the 6th floor, if there was goings on up there, the perpetrators could have went down to the 5th floor into that elevator maintenance area right above the elevator, which it only went to the 4th floor. They could have accessed that elevator through the panel in the ceiling of the elevator, dropped down into it, taken that elevator down to the 1st floor, and gotten out of the building.
Now I am gonna laugh.
Yeah, I know. He's not saying that's what happened. He's sort of speculating and posing that as a possibility. And
that's predicated on the electricity supply cutting off, isn't it? That
he does weave that into
that. You've got a window there to actually. Okay, I guess that the floorboards are already, they've already been, detached in some way, and you just take them up and you drop down into the ceiling, but you need the electricity supply to be off so that nobody uses that bloody lift, right? Yeah. But which is interesting, but also to your idea that if the shooters are on the 5th, then that and the 6th is basically a setup. It's a setup for the patsy. Yeah. Then that kind of does work, but it's so speculative, isn't it?
It is.
Because Armstrong's thing is about 2 Oswalds in the TSBD, isn't it?
There's no evidence for that escape theory. I found it interesting, and the other thing that I find, we have no photos of that area. I even contacted the 6th floor museum to see if they had any kind of photos from back in that period of time, not necessarily that day or whatever, but just anything of the 5th floor, so we could get a little bit more information about the layout. And I guess when I say the layout, I really mean that area above the passenger elevator, to see if there's a photo that could corroborate or not corroborate, but to further that as a possibility, or to say, no, there's no way they could have gotten in.
The photo, there's the FBI reenactment photos of the 3 black guys, but it's not it's not quite the perspective panned round to where the top of the elevator would be.
Yeah, and I didn't. So I'm not saying that. I read that article about the time I was trying to make sense of these guys on the 5th floor, and I thought, well, if there was stuff going on down on the 5th floor, and there was access to that elevator from the 5th floor, that would certainly be convenient.
But you do know that they abseiled out the rear of the building, don't you?
Yeah,
that's another theory. You know that.
Gary, do you want to come in? I know you've been waiting to ask a question. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I noticed. I haven't looked at this kind of detail for what you're talking about, Greg. So it's amazing to me that you were able to focus on all these issues. I am looking at page 64 in the Warren report, and I found Ewan's in the index, of course, and it quotes him on page 64. And then in the end of anything that's referring to him and Harkness says, the error in the radio message was due to my own hasty count of the floors.
Yeah.
So I guess I didn't hear you say that he was blaming himself for miscounting, and that Ewan's did mean the ledge. That's the most obvious ledge because it runs the length of the building.
Sure.
And so it would be the most likely prominence that you would refer to. Not to say that Harkness is his veracity is without question, but he does say that it was his mistake. So
that's right, and that's a great. Thank you for pointing that out, Gary. I think if you get a chance, go to that audio file that's linked in the matrix. It'll take you to the Ewan's statements on my website, and listen to that HSCA audio interview. I don't have the Harkness testimony in front of me, but read that and then listen to Ewan's in that audio file. And what I make of it is, and that's the real question, is the exact exchange between Ewan's and Harkness standing out in front of that building, at the time it happened. What did he actually say, and what floor did he identify? And that's not entirely clear to me when I read Harkness's testimony, but when I listen to Ewan's describe it in that audio, and he keeps saying third window from the top, clearly there was something between Ewan's and Harkness. When he went to Harkness and told him what he saw, there was clearly some confusion about counting of the windows and which floor it was and which ledge they're talking about. And I agree with you, the ledge below between 6 and 7 is much more prominent than the one between 5 and 6. Both ledges, but the top one is certainly more prominent.
Thank you.
Ewan seems pretty, when I listen to that audio file, that interview, to me seems pretty clear and pretty certain about third window from the top. So read Ewan's, read Harkness, and listen to that audio file, and you guys can kind of decide for yourself what you think went on there. But pretty fascinating stuff for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so in my when I thought about talking to you guys today, my initial intention was to go through all the slides we just went through in about 15 or 20 minutes and spend most of the time on our conclusion slide. As you can see, that didn't really work out like that. But so, and I kind of, we went through all this stuff, even though it's taken some time. I still feel like we went through it quickly and just sort of hit the highlights. So if you're interested in this stuff, and if you have some time over the holidays or whenever, you could just pull up that witness matrix and just pick a witness and start reading through their statements, and probably get a better understanding of what they said they saw, better than I've been able to represent it here today. I've done my best, but there's a lot of detail in some of those reports. And so if you have time, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Especially I think Brennan, Ewan's, Carr, Brennan and Ewan's for sure. They're just, and even though he's not a witness, Sawyer, I found his testimony, his Warren Commission testimony, absolutely fascinating. So real quick, I know we've been at it for a little while. Is everyone doing okay? Do we want to take a break for a few minutes before we get into the rest of it, or?
No, man, just keep pounding.
All right.
Greg, can I ask some questions? Although I do want to have a break to get another gin and tonic. But anyway,
it's 5 hours earlier here, but I'm with you. We can do that.
So I got a couple of questions, couple of statements really. Question wise, key witnesses, right? So we know Brennan's, as Tony said in the chat, is a bit flaky. So you got Ewan's, Walter, Rowland. Do you think they're the most credible witnesses? I mean, at the end of the day, if you think the building was south facing, loads of sun, as we know, so you could, if you're in front of it in some fashion, you are going to be able to see pretty much, quite a lot of detail, right? So, you've got Rowland outside of the sheriff's building, you've got Walter outside of the jail, and you've got Ewan's, by the kind of pool thing in front.
Yeah.
Out of those three, or all of those three as a basket, do you really assign a priority to those three?
For me, I think one of the best witnesses, the guy I'm most interested in, is Amos Ewans. He was front and center there, and I feel like, I read some of those early FBI reports, and I'm not sure. And then I read his Warren Commission testimony, and like when he's correcting them to say, no, I never said it was a white guy. I said it was a guy with a white spot or a light spot on his head. I didn't say it was a white guy. I couldn't tell the guy's race. I read that just that part of his Warren Commission testimony. I read that and I thought, okay, well, that's a pretty big deal, right? I never said it was a white guy. I said the guy had a bald spot. Like, how does the FBI screw that up in the report, right? So it just made me, when I read his Warren Commission testimony and I listened to that audio file, what I read and what I heard, I think he was a brave kid. For 13 years old, no parents, black kid in Dallas. He even says in that audio, they were trying to get me to say things I didn't say, or trying to get me to say things I didn't want to say. Words to that effect. You can listen to it. But so I think Ewan's, to me, I put him near the top in terms of credibility because of where he was, and because when we get to hear from him directly in his Warren Commission testimony and in his audio interview for the HSCA, I find that compelling.
Have you got the audio interview on your website?
I do. Yep.
That sounds good. I mean, I did send a thing on the chat. I mentioned the west side of the TSBD. I just looked it up. It's on page 208 of Grodin's book, Killing of a President, which I think is the first one he did.
Yeah.
Photographic orientated one. Also, that white spot, there's a light. There's a TSBD light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's it. Again, that could throw some confusion there. I'd also, do you know that? Have you read that there were 2 Ewans there? His brother was there.
No,
yeah. There's I don't know where I read this. God knows what YouTube video, what bloody forum. I have no idea. But there were 2 Ewans, like a 13 and a 16-year-old brothers. Right, and also I put it on the chat that the girl that Tibbet was having an affair with Witherspoon,
Johnny Maxie Witherspoon.
She worked at Austin's barbecue, and she claims that Ewans was a black boy cook there. I don't know what that means. Whether that means a washer-upper or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
So again, I have no idea whether that's like a crazy, conspiratorial X degrees of separation, but that might be worth looking into. But I definitely look into the idea that there were 2 Ewans.
Well, it's interesting because the Johnny Maxie Witherspoon, and now you probably recall it better than I do. What I recall is that there was a young black kid named Amos that worked there, and I was assuming, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that was Amos Ewans. Did we know that it was the same?
I don't know. It could be HSCA testimony. I don't know where I saw it somewhere, but she claimed that obviously she worked. I mean, the whole Austin's barbecue thing is bizarre as well, isn't it? Right?
It is.
The right wing John Birch kind of thing going on there, But anyway, don't know whether that's relevant or not. It could be a complete bullshit thing, coincidence thing. Who knows? But I saw somebody else doing some research. Could be a bullshit video. Can't remember. 2 Ewans brothers, a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Now that's fascinating, Neil, because
I can't remember who it was. Could be one of these cook ideas. Don't know.
Well, in the audio and the HSCA audio interview with Ewans, when he said he had a camera and was taking pictures, I fell out of my chair almost. I mean, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This wasn't in his Warren Commission testimony, wasn't in any of the FBI reports. First time it ever came up to my knowledge. And in that, I didn't mention it, but he does say that he was there with another person. And I don't think he names them, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know if that maybe is
that could be intriguing if that was his brother.
Yeah. Now I think he said, I'm not sure when that person left or how they got separated. But yeah, I wonder if that was his brother. I'd have to listen to that again to be sure.
Don't know if I can find the source. I'll send it to you. But if you dismissed him for the time being, and then you looked at the east side of Houston, you look at Rowland and Walter.
Yeah.
With the sun on the south face.
Yeah.
You'd think. I mean, they're not that far away. I mean, you'd think that though what they saw is reasonably credible, isn't it?
And Neil, that's, I mean, I guess that's up to everyone's, opinion on what they think. But you've heard people say like, gosh, when you go there, it's so small, right? It's much smaller.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 150, 170 feet away.
According
to Rowland's testimony, right?
I feel like I'm a grown middle-aged man, right? I feel like if I met Amos Ewans or one of these witnesses somehow, that I would act my age. I'd probably be like a 15-year-old girl meeting Justin Bieber. I'd be all excited and have a million questions, and I would make a mess of the whole thing probably. But that's because what's striking to me, but you just kind of hit on it, Neil, is like, I'm literally, I know it's the tinfoil hat conspiracy guy stereotype. I'm literally in my basement.
I do see Fraser behind there eating his sandwich.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So, but it just, when I think about these witnesses, it's right to, I think, to assess their credibility and to challenge some of the things like with Brennan or with Carr. Very, it's wise to be a skeptic and to do those kind of things. But on the other hand, I think to myself with these witnesses, like, I sit in my basement and I do this stuff as a hobby because I really enjoy it and I'm interested. These people were right freaking there. Like I try to put yourself in their shoes, right? You're standing right there. You're looking right at the flipping building, like the Kennedy's going. I mean, it's, they're just feet away from you. So I think in terms of, Neil, your question about they had a pretty good view. I mean, yeah, in my opinion, they did. I mean, except for Brennan, who was facing the other way than he said he was.
Well, if you look at the Zapruder film, it's very clear he's facing down Elm, right?
Yeah. Or he's looking at, he's facing Houston, but he's got his head turned
exactly.
around.
He's on the diagonal.
Yeah, and there. So yeah, that's. I mean, it hits me. I guess where I was going with like the comedy about if I ever met one of these witnesses or had the chance to talk to him, it just strikes me. We've spent. You guys are probably like me. You spent most of your adult life, going down rabbit holes and trying to figure this stuff out because it's fascinating. I mean, these people that were right frickin' there and saw and heard this stuff right in front of their eyes. I put a lot of weight. I'm not saying they're all correct, or because I'm sure they're not. I'm sure there are people in here of these 17 people who maybe got some of the details mixed up or aren't sure. But I just find it fascinating to try to put myself in their shoes and imagine what they might have seen being right there front and center to this event that only lasted a few seconds that I've spent most of my life trying to figure out.
But do you know what I think the counterpoint is that the trauma of this must have been off the charts. I mean, I've had minor car crashes where I can't quite remember the detail. I mean, can you imagine being there? I mean, the whole Dealey Plaza echo argument, etc. You've got no bloody idea where the stuff is coming from. So all the audio witnesses could be fallacious, and then as a visual witness, your memory is going to potentially, even though on a sort of contemporaneous basis, if they're, like the Newmans were interviewed immediately. To Bart's point, why the fuck weren't they Warren Commission, witnesses? But they were interviewed immediately, right? And they still might have got it wrong, by the way, right? Because you have no idea what trauma, the psychological stuff that must go through your head, and you think what you saw, and you may not be lying, you may not be spinning, you may not be inserting yourself into a narrative of some sort, and you say what you think you saw or heard, but it may not be true. Even though we as you know, researchers or whatever we are, you know, we like to think that we want to prioritize and weight, you know, the stuff that's happening, you know, contemporaneously. The reality is even those people
Sure.
could have got stuff wrong.
For sure. And Neil, I agree with you 100%. And I think that's why it's important to identify as many of these witnesses as we can. Because when you said, like, yeah, I think 100% they could be doing the best they can and just maybe not remembering details, right? That's certainly possible. But I think that's why it's important. You know, we got 17 people, right? So the more witnesses that we can identify what they saw, I think gives us a better idea of maybe what actually went down when you look at that in totality and say, well, okay, I might not have all the answers, but I know 17 people can't be wrong, right? Like one or two maybe, but so your point is well taken though.
That's why I was thinking that Rowland and Walter might be, because the thing with Ewins is that because of his age and because of his color,
yeah,
you know, there are issues with that. Whereas Rowland and Walter, you know, they're on the east side of Houston. They've got a great view. The sun is shining to some extent. I mean, I don't bloody know, but intuitively, I would weight them a bit more. That's all than say a Brennan, who we know was looking down Elm.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brennan's the least credible, and I agree that Walther and Rowland are very credible. With Ewans, you know, I don't know, maybe we disagree on a little bit on him. It's just my own. I can't prove it, but like, or don't have much to support it. I read his testimony. I listen to him, and I see a kid who was too young to you know, he just to realize the implications of him just blurting out the truth and sticking to it. You know, that sort of youthful, you know, you don't have enough experience yet to be cautious about what you tell the cops. I just see a kid who was honest, and then when you hear him talking about how he was threatened and how they were trying to make him say things and whatever, I look at that and I see a kid who was trying to be honest in the face of probably a pretty scary situation. But
okay, can I just interject? Sorry to do this.
Oh, please.
First of all, I'm going to type in a link to. I've typed in a link to Johnny Maxey Witherspoon's notes by Livingston, and I also now I'm going to insert. Oh, for fuck's sake! I am going to add a link to an audio interview with her as well. So you can all nab that. Craig, was it you who asked me about offered me about the transcripts, because I've lost the name of the person who did this? If you can look at the private message I sent you, please. I found something that's very worthwhile transcribing as such, because I just realized I completely forgot about it. I've got a ton of audio interviews of Harry Livingston that I digitized as such. So you'll regret you offered it to me. But yeah, so anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries.
Hey, would it be okay if we took 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I drank it's morning here and I drank a lot of coffee, so you know.
Well, it's time for the next gin and tonic, Greg.
Oh, right on, my friend. If we could take a few minutes and I'll come back and wrap this up, and we can chat some more.
Okay.
That sounds great. Okay. About 10 minutes?
That'd be great. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And then it all became
conclusions.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I probably started prematurely here, but
that's okay, Greg. Go ahead.
So admittedly speculation here, Bart and guys, but I wonder, like, one of the conclusions I'm going to talk about here in a second is, it's clear to me, and you may have a different opinion, but when I read through these witnesses and they talk about guys hanging, these short barreled rifles out a window, or a pipe or a rifle protruding and firing, or gunman's, you can see him put his hand and head and rifle out the window. To me, that all sounds, forget about whether it was a good vantage point to shoot from, but that just all sounds ridiculous. Or these guys, the guy Rowland saw standing there walking around with a rifle, holding a rifle prior to the shots. Like, to me, these guys weren't trying to hide. I speculate that they wanted to be seen. I mean, I remember.
No, that's true. That's totally true. The whole thing was to shoving the rifle barrel out and basically draw the attention to a possible shooter over there.
And sticking your face in the window.
Yeah.
Walking around in front of the windows.
Yeah. Just get noticed. Yeah.
None of that washes. So this is where my speculation comes in. You guys tell me, maybe I'm full of crap, but I'm not saying this is what happened, but it's an idea that I've been considering. I remember reading somewhere, and it was a quote from David Atlee Phillips about wanting to trying to put Kennedy's back up against the wall vis-a-vis Cuba. And there's also some documents that talk about Dave Morales meeting with Hal Feeney and Jack Modisette down at Gitmo, talking about how they were going to try to blow something up, try to make some explosion, like someone blew something up at Guantanamo and blame it on Castro. They were kicking around ideas to stir up trouble and get Kennedy to put his back up and go after Cuba more aggressively. And I wonder, could there have been an operation strictly confined within the Texas School Book Depository to fire some shots around the plaza as Kennedy passed by, not really do any damage, and have that, but plant the rifle, pin this on Oswald as a someone who was connected to Castro because of the Mexico City trip and all the evidence they manufactured. Could there have been an operation just to shoot up the plaza a little bit and get Kennedy fired up to go after Castro? And somebody like a Dave Morales, or insert whoever you want, gets wind of this and decides, no, we really want to do him. We're going to put a couple guys out in front of him. And when somebody fires shots out of the 5th or 6th floor, whatever floor you think the shots came from, when they execute their little plan to shoot up the plaza and cause a ruckus, the real shooters pop them from the front, and they slip out of the plaza. And even the guys in the Texas School Book Depository running that operation are looking at each other going, what the fuck just happened?
No,
I don't know if that's...
Here's the thing you need to consider. I mean, I would consider that, but I think there's a big issue. Okay. If you look at the Zapruder film, the first shot is in his throat. Okay. What if if that car had just gone like half a mile faster, it would have been shot full frontal in his face.
Yeah.
That would have changed the narrative completely.
Yeah.
Because the Zapruder film would have shown a shot full frontal in his face if the car had only gone half a mile quicker.
Yeah.
All right. Now that would just, how then do you pick a scenario to bring with the Zapruder film? How do you pick that as a scenario coming from the sixth floor museum, 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository?
Bart, I wonder, I mean, the people that did it, I'm not, and this is, again, it's my opinion. I don't think they cared about one shooter, two shooters.
They weren't informed as such, but get this. Okay. My thing is this. The guy who raises his hand, the Cuban, he's Cuban, definitely Cuban. He raises his hand, his fist, because Kennedy ain't hit. Well, he's hit, but he's not dead.
Yeah.
And the fist only raises after that first shot. If you look at the Zapruder film, you can clearly see that. Now, so there's my thing. This guy was there to see whether he was dead. Whether the Umbrella Man was part of it, that's a different, maybe as a go code, it's possible.
Yeah.
But the thing with the fact is that the fist goes up after the frontal shot, and he basically says, yo, man, he ain't dead. Keep shooting. And that's when the rest of the shots start coming in.
Yeah, no, I agree, Bart. I think that guy who I think was Felipe Vidal Santiago, but that guy and the umbrella guy, you know, the photographs of, I think it's Rickerby and I forget what other one, maybe Bond, some of the other ones they're in, where after the shots, those two guys are sitting next to each other on the curb.
Yeah.
Tells me that umbrella, that they were, whatever they were doing, they were together. And yeah, that's my assumption, is that they were some sort of physical signals to say, you know, keep shooting, he's not dead. Or I know there's been, I think it was the interview Hargraves gave to Noel Twyman, I think is where this comes from, about the possibility of a car bomb being further down Elm as a contingency.
There's no evidence to back that up. I think
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. There's no evidence, Bart. But if there was some sort of contingency plan down the line, if they didn't get him in Dealey, I just wonder if one of those umbrella guy or the Cuban, the dark skinned guy, yeah, if that wasn't part of what they were doing, is basically signaling he's dead or he's not dead, you know, keep firing or get the bomb ready, or, you know, contingent, whatever. That's what I speculate those two guys were doing. I don't know. I haven't, I realize there's really no way to prove any of that, but to me, clearly they were trying to offer some sort of visual cues to somebody, because their actions were so very much outliers in terms of the other spectators that were there. But anyway, I'll move on to the, what's that?
Continue, please.
Yeah, thanks. So what I concluded from sorting through these 70, I think it's 75 statements from these 17 witnesses, if I tried to boil it down and say, okay, well, you have different witnesses that their accounts changed in some cases over time. Sometimes they were consistent. Sometimes witnesses agree with one another, like the short barreled rifle we see from told about from Worrell, and I think the other one was Carolyn Walther. So there's agreement, there's disagreement, there's some things that are consistent, there are some accounts that changed. What do we make of all this? How do we boil it down? So my takeaways from all this are that there were men with rifles present on both the 5th and 6th floors between 12:15 and 12:30. So what they were doing, who they were, what they were up to, how many there were, you know, still we can't nail that down, but there was something going on both those floors 15 minutes prior to the assassination. And I guess one other point as I'm leading into this, the time reminded me of it. Kennedy's motorcade was running about 5 minutes late. He was shot at 12:30. So the lunch period at the Texas School Book Depository was 12 to 12:45. We know this from the testimony of Bill Shelley and maybe Lovelady. I think there's 2 or 3 of the workers that confirmed that the lunch period was 12 to 12:45. So what that means is if Kennedy was shot at 12:30, they were running 5 minutes late, so he should have been coming through the plaza at 12:25, which is the midpoint of that lunch break. So if you're putting this whole thing together, like, I mean, just to think that it was all a coincidence, you know, if Kennedy rolls through that plaza when it's not the middle of the lunch break for those guys, there's a pretty good chance that those floors, the 5 and 6, are going to be populated with workers, right? So I just find it, I guess I'm not really making an assertion, I think it's just an interesting, when you think about the motorcade and the route and the timing of it all, the fact that Kennedy passed by there at the midpoint of the lunch hour is an incredible coincidence, right? Because whoever was in that building needed access to those floors. They needed to be up there and be able to do their thing and get out of there, which probably wouldn't have been possible if he would have rolled through there at 11:30 or 1 o'clock when there would have been more workers in the building on those floors. So I think that's just an interesting coincidence, the timing. But back to the conclusions, definitely or possibly shots from the 5th floor. This is excluding the witnesses that did not specify a floor. So definitely or possibly shots from the 5th floor. Look at Couch, Edwards, Ewans, Fisher, Hallmark, Walther, Worrell, and that unknown witness. Those are the witnesses that state what they observed was shots from the 5th floor or possibly the 5th. When I say possibly, I'm talking about those witnesses that said 4th or 5th or 5th or 6th. Definitely or possibly the 6th floor, you have 6 witnesses. Brennan, Couch, Crawford, Jackson, Powell, and Worrell. And again, like that unknown witness, or Howard Brennan, or Richard Carr, you know, you all will have to read through there and decide for yourself whether you find those witnesses credible. I don't find, for example, Brennan, I don't think any of us find him credible, but he needs to be listed because he was a witness. He is on the record. So I don't believe him, but he does, he is on the record and as to what he saw. So anyway, so the third bullet point, my third conclusion, judging from the statements of these witnesses, I think it's very likely that there was a white man with blonde or light hair up there, a Latin or dark-skinned man or men, and a man wearing a brown or tan sport coat. And again, this would be the suspect description matrix that lists each witness. Not every witness who saw something had a physical description of the suspect, right? Like, so Ruth Hallmark only saw smoke. So some of these other folks maybe just saw like the barrel of a gun, but they didn't see a physical description of a person. So if they had a physical description, they're on that suspect description matrix, and you can go through and look at that and what I've written there for yourselves. But based on that, those, you know, there was a white man with blonde or light hair, Latin or dark-skinned man or men, and a man wearing a brown or tan sport coat. Those were based on what our witnesses tell us. These are the descriptions that they offered about the people they saw up there. So who they were, exactly which floor or window, and what they were doing, we can't prove any of that. But these are the descriptions they gave. This next bullet point is not really a conclusion, so my apologies for including it in conclusions, but I was in a hurry and wanted to I didn't want to forget this point. I'm not suggesting that James Powell was up in a window with a rifle or anything like that. But so he was the Army intelligence agent who snapped that Powell photo that was taken of the TSBD about 30 seconds, about 45 seconds after shots fired. And then if you read Powell's, and I'm not sure if I have Powell's stuff on my website. I don't think that I do. But he snapped that photo, and then he ran inside the Texas School Book Depository to call his office, I believe is what he said. And he had to produce his credentials as an Army intelligence officer to be able to get out of the TSBD after it had been sealed. And what I find kind of interesting is that, so we don't have a picture of him that I've ever seen. Not sure what he looks like. I'm not sure what he was wearing. I just wonder, you know, it's kind of, again, one of those coincidences, right? You've got an Army intelligence guy trying to get out of the building after the shooting. I think that's kind of ironic and kind of, you know, worth looking into. So I just wonder if maybe it's exactly what he said. Maybe it was his day off and he was there taking pictures of the president, and maybe that's all there is to it, and it's all true what he said. But I also wonder, I mean, he's an Army intelligence guy. He gets caught in the building after the shooting. What if he was there to provide some sort of logistical support or whatever? Maybe, you know, and if that was the case, I just wonder, it'd be interesting to know the chain of custody of that photo, that Powell photo, right? Did that really, you know, if he took the photo, then he clearly wasn't in the Texas School Book Depository providing any kind of support, because he was out on the street and the photo was the evidence of that. But if he was actually in the TSBD doing something related to any kind of operation, having a photo that was allegedly taken by you right after the shooting would preclude you from being able to be in the building at that time. So I realize that's a lot of speculation and just sort of what ifs. But I just
Greg, could I just comment on that?
Yeah, please.
Again, I think it's one of these threads, probably on the Ed forum, but I'm not sure. That there is some suggestion that it's the Powell, possibly the Reed photo. I can't remember which, unfortunately, was taken on the 23rd. Okay, same location, but on the 23rd, day after. And as I say, it was a thread somewhere on one of the forums. It may have been the Ed forum, and I presume that whoever was suggesting this was basing it on the light and the sun, and the shadows and so forth.
I mean,
the whole Powell thing is ridiculous anyway, isn't it? The Powell, the Reed thing they're ridiculous, right?
I took the day off and just wanted to be there to take pictures of the president. And then, an Army intelligence officer, and I just happened to wind up getting caught inside the TSBD after the shots were fired. I mean,
and the Reed, I just happened to be taking that bus in,
Stuart Reed,
up on Elm, and then the TSBD, and then
he winds up at the Texas Theater taking pictures too. Like the guy knew exactly where to go. What a genius, right?
And then he buggers off to Panama the next day. Apparently. So I'm just saying that there is a thread somewhere out there on Powell, or Reed, can't remember which one, proposing that the photo that we all look at was actually taken on the Saturday.
Well, that would be if there's anything nefarious. If Powell was up to something, if he was in that Texas School Book Depository for a reason other than just to make a phone call, if you're trying to prove that you weren't in there, having a photo that you took outside the building would be a way to prove that. So I find it interesting. There is this photo associated with him, and he was an Army intelligence guy caught inside the building right after shots fired. That's pretty interesting to me. And the fact that we don't know what the guy looks like, we don't know what he was wearing. Unfortunately, a lot more questions than answers. But when we talk about these witnesses and what they saw and the description and what was going on those floors and all that, it just made me think of Powell. And I'm sure there's no way there was a guy up there with official U.S. government, credentials, like firing shots. That's a non-starter for me. But that doesn't mean he couldn't have been in or around the building trying to provide some sort of logistical support or direction, we've got the guys with the fake Secret Service credentials right around Dealey Plaza. I mean, that would, when we talk about how those guys got out of the building, whether it was some like Bruce Wilson diehard going through the roof of an elevator and all that crap, or whether they got out some other way, I don't know. But I've always thought that's the guys that were in there. There had to be somebody, I would think, that had some sort of Secret Service credentials or some sort of credentials where if shit went sideways and somebody got picked up or the cops got in there quicker than they wanted to or whatever, that there could be somebody that had something to flash to say, I'm Secret Service or I'm Army intelligence or whatever.
Well, that in itself is another 3-hour discussion.
It is. Yeah.
It's the whole exit rear TSBD, Harkness going back there and, what he saw or what he didn't saw, Joe Smith going down, to the car park area and the Secret Service guy flashing, the witnesses around the pool of blood kind of bit, by burglar 3, that stuff that, who's the other guy? Not Arnold, Gordon Arnold.
Yeah.
See somebody taking his camera, I think, from where he was standing. I mean, that in itself is such a fascinating, discussion, isn't it? But I mean, my intuition has always been that if there were shooters in the TSBD, or if there were some kind of false flag operation in the TSBD, they had to leave by the rear. They had to leave by the rear. To me, is the obvious.
Yeah, I agree.
Is the obvious exit. I can't prove it. It's all speculation, but that's kind of what I think.
So I think Carr is among the witnesses that saw some dark-skinned men come out from behind the TSBD shortly after the shooting. And I forget who this other witness is. It's not somebody we talked about today.
Worrell was involved, wasn't he, on that?
Well, somebody saw, maybe it was Worrell, but somebody saw armed men with guns around the rear of the Texas School Book Depository.
I think they were on the northwest corner of the Dowtex building, that area.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to remember who this witness was, but they said they assumed, or they thought, oh, they must be Secret Service or security of some kind. But it was a bunch of guys with rifles. So I don't know who they were, but my guess is whoever they were, they probably had Secret Service credentials.
And we also discussed this before. There's that car on the west side of Houston that is
facing the wrong way,
between the front of the TSBD and the rear of the TSBD on the west side of Houston.
Yep.
And you mentioned that before, some character I'd never heard of.
Oh, are we thinking of
something like Jimmy Chu, but it wasn't Jimmy Chu.
David Aubrey Soy?
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah.
He knew. Hold on. It's going to take me a second here to You guys ever see the movie Tommy Boy, where they talk about he couldn't recall something, and the other actor in the movie said, "Well, that's from all those years of partying. Your brain's full of malted hops and bong resin. That's why you can't remember it." So
that makes sense.
I don't know why that popped in my head. I was trying to recall so David Aubrey Suey, he was an O&I guy, and there's some stuff about him on my website too, in the documents, in the selected documents section, I think. But he was an O&I guy, and there's a photograph of him, and it's on my website, and I'm struggling with the it's a guy that knew. Shoot, there's a photo of Soy and another Navy guy, and this other Navy guy knew Robert Oswald. Or no, I'm sorry. Oh crap. I better back that up. I'm not. Look at the if you go to my website, look at the photo of David Aubrey Soy, and let me see while I'm going to try to pull this up on my other screen here, because now it's driving me nuts. But there was a guy, so in Soy's obituary, this is how I heard of this guy. In Soy's obituary, which is on my so if you go to the photographs and then go to intelligence officers and go down to O&I, David Aubrey. Thank you. Yeah, the photo in the top left. Frank Kristenik, that's it. So obviously not a great photo, but that is Soy and Kristenik, and Kristenik testified before the Warren Commission. And what's interesting is, and it's not Robert Oswald, it's Michael Payne. Frank Kristenik, that guy, had a relationship with Michael Payne. They were, and again, you can read Kristenik's Warren Commission testimony, and I think maybe they worked together. I'm not positive about that, but somehow they knew each other. And I find it interesting that I don't know how well he knew Soy, but there's a photo of those two guys. Soy, in his obituary, if you would go to the documents link and go to selected documents up in the main body of the page there. Oh, there you go. Okay. And then go down to Soy. And open up his obituary. And I guess you guys could do this for yourself if you wanted to. But anyway, the interesting thing, how I originally came across this guy, is in his obituary, it says somewhere in here that he was outside of the parked outside or outside of the Texas School Book Depository. Yeah, right there next to your cursor there. Yeah, when President John F. Kennedy was fatally shot in Dallas, Captain Suey was sitting in his car waiting for the presidential motorcade to pass the Texas School Book Depository. Kind of an interesting coincidence for that guy to be there.
How the hell did you discover this one, Greg?
You know, I wish I knew, Neil. It all runs together after so. That's why I had to start putting this crap on a website, because my brain is not good enough to keep track of all this. I had to start writing it down somewhere, or saving these clippings and this kind of stuff. But anyway,
but he's not a character that is kind of high profile, regularly known in this thing.
And I have no idea what his deal is. I have no idea but I mean, you're telling me this guy was parked outside of the TSBD.
Yeah.
And he was O&I, and he knew Frank Kristenik, who knew Michael Payne, or worked with Michael Payne. Like, I don't know. That's
because there's other people that have mentioned that kind. I think it's, you know, where the fire escape is on the east side of the TSBD, isn't it? That bit. Yeah.
And so if you you don't have to, we won't do it here because it's lengthy, but go to Kristenik's Warren Commission testimony, and it'll, I think in there is where when I looked that guy up, I'm reading through his testimony, and I'm like, wait a minute, this guy worked with Michael Payne? You have got to be kidding me. Like, this can't be real. So I don't know much about Suey other than those clippings and those photographs, but it sure is interesting that he's parked outside the TSBD and he was O&I, and he knew Kristenik, and Kristenik knew Michael Payne. Like, what an interesting set of coincidences, right? So back to yeah.
Have you ever run across Ewan's comments? I assume to Hartnett, what's his name?
David Harkness,
yeah, that he saw somebody running out of the depository. It's referenced in Sylvia Maher's Accessories After the Fact in 1987. But I'm wondering if that could be accurate, and that there would be some place where it was elaborated upon. But
I didn't know that, Gary.
That might be significant.
Thank you for that. I'm going to, I think I've got that book somewhere here in I got a million books on my bookshelf, so I think I have that one. If not, I'll get it. But that's interesting. No, I didn't know that.
And there was somebody else that I can't remember that she referred to, told Harkness that they also saw, but it was independently corroborated.
Wow.
They weren't talking to each other.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna look in that book when we get off this call. That's great. And that's what I hope, you know, when I started putting these matrices together, it was nothing more than just me trying to, I need to put things in boxes and have them in order for my brain to be able to process what the heck it means. And so it was just me trying to organize this stuff. But I think once I sort of put it on the website, and I did the Lancer presentation last year, kind of one of my hopes was that it would filter out to people that are interested in this case. And I would, like stuff Gary just told me, and the stuff some of the stuff Bart was talking about earlier, I was hoping to learn some new things from different researchers, things that I didn't know or hadn't come across, that I could then add to this and sort of build on what we have. And Neil, I don't know, was it you, or it was either you or James that put me on to the Jim Bishop book? And
I sent you some pages from the was it called the first day thing,
the day
whatever.
Kennedy was shot or something.
Yeah.
So I did not know until you mentioned that. I didn't have the book, and I didn't know that Bishop claimed Brennan told him fifth floor initially. So
Well, actually, to be fair, I didn't have the book, but Ryan sent me the book free from America. So let's have a shout out for Ryan there. But, yeah, no, I mean, the trouble with that book is it reads so nicely, but there's no citations. So
yeah, I was so disappointed when I got to the bibliography, and he's just got a list of sources for the whole book.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
I've got a couple of other questions. I know I'm monopolizing your presentation today, so I apologize to the others. I think there is, I might be wrong, and we can discuss it. I think you've got a slight error on the location of Carr.
Okay.
I think he's further south. I think he's on the construction site of the new court building, south of Commerce and Houston. A little bit further south, towards the Dallas Morning News, that way.
You're talking about that photograph where I had the little yellow box.
Yes, you have him in Old Red. I think he needs to be further south.
I think you're right, Neil. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. Yeah.
Another question I've got is, when we were corresponding a year ago, you mentioned Jessica Shores and what she'd done on Jack Doughty. I mean, everyone wants to know about Jack Doughty, right?
Right.
Do you have anything? I've looked her up on Google. I can't really see her. I saw her on a Facebook comment book, doing some stuff against some absolute bullshit Jackie killed Kennedy theory, right, which you get from time to time. But I can't find any of her work. Have you got anything that's interesting that you could share with us?
So Jessica, she is one of the admins for the Facebook group Mice Fighting Gorillas. So that's where you can find her and most of the stuff she's looked into. She's one of those researchers that's really good in the ancestry type stuff, in
Find a grave.
Yeah, she's into all that ancestry type research. So if you're trying to find somebody or find out who was related to who, and if there's anyone still left to track down, she's really good at that kind of research.
Has she got a photo? She got a photo of him?
Of Doherty, no. But here, get this.
Okay.
No, her and Linda Giovanni Zambanini, or
Giovanna Zambanini.
Thank you. Yes, she's done some good work too on that site. But
sorry, do you have a site? Do you have a website there, or
for
Zambanini and whoever?
Oh, no, I just
Zambanini's come up.
Zambanini's at ROKC. So if you become a member there, then you can private message her.
Yeah, and that Mice Fighting Gorillas on Facebook, that group, her and Shores and Zambanini both post in there. That's where I know.
Sorry, great. Fighting Gorillas. What was the first word?
Mice Fighting Gorillas. So it's the line in the movie JFK where John Candy, as Dean Andrews, is having that lunch with Garrison. Yeah. And he says, "You're a mouse fighting a gorilla." So that's where whoever came up with that group, it's Mice Fighting Gorillas.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, John Candy was brilliant in that movie. I just thought he was such a great actor and so funny. And have you
looked into Dean Andrews? Because Rob Clark is doing quite a bit of work on that at the moment.
I have not.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is indeed, yeah. So, Doherty. So, okay, you mentioned Rob. So I was talking to Rob a while back, and I don't have it handy, but you guys probably all know this photo. There's a photo of Bonnie Ray Williams and Danny Arce being put into the back of a Dallas police squad car to be taken down to the station for questioning. And there's a photo of the two of them in the back of the car, and then there's a photo that was taken just prior to them getting in the back of the car. So it's a police car. It's Bonnie Ray Williams and it's Danny Arce standing out there on the sidewalk, ready to get into the back of the squad car. And there's a third person that's standing on the sidewalk, sort of near them, just just a plain kind of looking white guy. And Rob speculates that that's Jack Doherty. And I think he's talking about Doherty's. There's testimony that Rob cited, and I'm not going to be able to tell you which testimony it is because I don't remember. It might be Doherty's, but I don't know. Where it must be Doherty, Arce, or Williams, because he's talking about, the witness is talking about we were taken down by the Dallas police or whatever to the station for questioning, or however he words it. But when he's talking about that, he mentions the three of those guys. He mentions Williams, Arce, and Doherty, like they were together. So Rob is saying,
no, Greg, you're slightly wrong there. In fact, we discussed this before you arrived.
Okay.
No, it's William Shelley. He's refuting the fact that it's William Shelley based on Bonnie Ray Williams' testimony in the Warren Commission, that it was him and Danny. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
We think that was Shelley then. We think that was Shelley.
And he's basically saying that photograph that we've all seen, you know, kind of like halfway down, a third of the way down Elm, wherever, when they get in the car, Rob is alleging that is not Shelley. We've all been mistaken. And he's law enforcement because, having read Bonnie Ray Williams' testimony, he makes it very clear that he doesn't get into a car with anybody else apart from Danny RK or whatever, however you pronounce it.
Well,
and that's the evidence. And therefore, that's why he believes it's his law enforcement. Because, and we were talking about this earlier on, actually, before you arrived, that, you know, there's this whole idea that Shelley is part of that FPCC pamphlet handout thing in the trade, you know, outside the trademark in New Orleans. Somebody thinks Shelley. Bart said earlier on that because of his nose, he doesn't think it's the same person. Okay. But the interesting thing is Rob is saying that is not Shelley at all. And it's probably law enforcement because he's actually quite well dressed, that character, isn't he?
Well, wrong. And he may be, Bart. I don't know. He told me he thought.
What are you saying, Bart?
He's wrong. It's Shelley. I'll show you the video right now.
Why do you think it's Shelley?
Check in chat. Say it in chat. Whoever can. Tony, click on that link and put it on full screen, please. In chat, YouTube.
Yeah, and I'm not saying Rob is correct. I'm just bringing up the fact that he was speculating that was. Now you said law enforcement, Neil. I think, unless I'm misremembering this, I think Rob was telling me he was thinking that was Doherty. That was the
my memory was
Doherty is a husky fellow. He's a big guy.
Right. So that guy there, next to the copper with a helmet.
Yeah.
You're saying, Bart, that is Shelley, are you?
Yeah, that's Shelley.
Yeah, but that's not the guy. But that's not the guy I'm talking about. Okay, stop it right. Oh, I think it's right near the end. Stop it. You see the white guy, right?
In the back.
Oh, you're thinking about the guy to the left of Ark.
It's either right where the cursor is. I think that's the guy he's talking about.
I think that's Senkel. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's Senkel.
Well, if I
Billy
find
Senkel.
It's hard to tell because Rob sent me a photo, and it's basically this scene right here, but it's from a different angle. And
I know I've got the photo, but it's on a different laptop.
Can you get that photo, Greg? Can you pull it up?
If you guys keep chatting for a second, I'm gonna look and see if I can find it.
Okay, so it's Shelley. It's Shelley. No, it's Shelley. It's Shelley. It's Shelley.
But why do you think Shelley wears a suit and tie? Why do you think he wears a suit and tie?
He did. Because he did. He's also captured in the couch film walking with Lovelady.
Yeah, but no, you don't know that. That's not very clear, that picture. Why do you actually No, come on, you can't say that.
100%, that's Shelley.
No, you can't say that. Come on. I know you believe that.
Listen, I know from the investigation that he left at 1:30 to go to the Dallas police and be interviewed, and that he went with Arca Ray Williams to it. You know why he's part of that? He's there to protect the colored guys. That's what he's doing. He's there to protect.
But how do you know what he was wearing?
Because I know the same thing. He's wearing a suit when he walks away, when he's standing on the landing, and he walks away with Lovelady towards the
You can't
railroad.
see that. That's not very clear in that film, is it?
Enough that he wears a suit
Hang on.
and his features.
Yeah, but pull up that film, Bart. Come on, you know the film where they walk down the extension? How can you tell what he's wearing? Show us.
Oh my God, you're a fucking denier. All right.
I'm just bloody asking for some evidence.
No, the evidence I already told. By the way, go to my website. On the right hand side in diary, yeah, it says Bill Shelley and Bill Lovelady went to the fucking railroad yard. There's a thread there that you can click on.
No, I appreciate it.
Hold on.
I've
And the footage is there. There are three bits of footage. One is the original footage. Two is an image that is blown up from the archives. And there are two close-up GIFs that I also put on YouTube that also show the suited guy with the same features of the face and the suit walking with Billy Lovelady out there. Look at that, then get back to me.
Okay.
On a different computer, I can't fucking show it on.
I will do.
Just real quick, guys. I got to go grab my power cord and plug my laptop in. It's about out of juice. Be right back. But I found that photo in question, and I'm going to send it to you guys. And I'm not saying it is or isn't anybody. I'm just going to tell you what Rob sent me and what he thinks. So, but give me a second to grab my power cord before I run out of juice. I'll be right back.
Here you go. Link is in the chat box. Look for yourself.
I'm going to go and get a G&T then.
Oh. What good is that? You need to look at the link.
Okay, there we go.
I'll come back to that, Bart, okay?
Whenever.
Let's see here. Give me 1 second. I'll send that photo in question to our chat. And then we'll move on and wrap up the conclusions.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. Sorry about the interruption. I didn't expect to be this long-winded and have my laptop run out of juice.
No, I think there's been some really good discussions, Greg. Do you know? I think people are really engaged in it.
Well, and it's fun for me because nobody in my daily life, my girlfriend, my friends, they could care less about this stuff. Their eyes glaze over and they just tune me out. So it's great to just kind of chat with some folks that are interested in this stuff, you know. Let's see here. Okay.
Richard has just posted, that's why we have the society, Greg. There's a common theme. You know, we're all interested in the subject.
Right on. Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to attach a photo here to the chat.
In the chat area, on the top right, just above where you type your message, there should be two symbols. One's got a smiley face and one's a picture of a piece of paper.
Yes.
And it's a piece of paper that you click on to be able to upload from your computer.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
That's all right. It's not obvious, Greg. It took me a few minutes to figure it out earlier on. Okay, so you... Okay.
Tell me if did that photo come through in the chat?
It's
Okay.
come you sent it directly to me.
Oh, sorry guys. I got it. I got it figured out here. Coming to everyone.
There's an upload thing in the chat, Greg. You press that button to the right.
That's what I think it's what he's done, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a folder thing.
Yep. Got it.
This one. Your computer.
Got it. Okay, I think I sent it to everybody.
Yes, I can see that now, Greg.
So-
That's perfect. Yeah.
So Bart, don't shoot me just yet. So when Rob and I were chatting, this photo that I just sent you guys, what he was speculating to me, and he admitted it's speculation, but the guy on the far left of this photo wearing the tie right behind Danny Arce, that's the guy he was speculating was Doherty.
But Greg,
Yeah.
the guy to the far right in front of the pillar above the crouching policeman.
Yep.
I'm inferring from listening to his podcast, that's the guy we all think is Shelley, that he said he didn't think was Shelley.
I think I did hear him say something about that, but I don't recall exactly what it was. So he doesn't think that's Shelley?
Yes, that's the guy that everybody thinks is Shelley,
Yes.
who he is suggesting isn't Shelley. Bart is refuting that.
Now that I'm not versed in, I guess. I always thought that was Shelley.
Yeah, so that was my big reveal from the Rob Clark podcast.
I
The
see.
guy to the left, you think that's Doughty in a suit?
I
and
don't.
tie?
I have no idea who it is. But
He doesn't
that
look like a warehouse supervisor, does he? Of some sort.
got a suit on, so I wouldn't think so. But I don't know. So I feel somewhat out of my element here because I'm, I don't know what Rob was basing that on some piece of testimony that he read about this incident where these guys were being taken down for questioning, and in something he read, Doherty was included in.
So he read. Sorry to interrupt. He read Bonnie Ray Williams' testimony. He's the guy in the middle.
Yeah, I don't know whose testimony he was reading.
He was reading Bonnie Ray Williams' Warren Commission testimony.
Okay.
He said that he got in the car with Danny. I always get this wrong. I'm
not sure either. Yeah.
Okay. Who is the guy to his immediate left?
Yeah.
Right. As we see it, to our immediate left, is Danny Arcay, and Bonnie Ray Williams is saying that he got in a car on his own with Danny Arcay, right? And then others came to, I don't even know whether they went to the sheriff or whether they went to City Hall, I don't know. But wherever they went to be interviewed, Bonnie Ray Williams said he was with Danny Arcay, and that was it. Now, Bonnie Ray Williams would have known all of these characters, Doughty, the whole bloody lot of them, right?
Everybody worked there, yeah.
Lovelady, the whole lot. So Rob's argument is that, his big reveal in the last 1 or 2 weeks is that that's not Shelley by the pillar above the crouching policeman. He's saying that that's not Shelley, and that's the guy that everyone thinks could be, well, not everyone, that's rubbish. Some people think was part of the FPCC handout, stage thing outside the Trade Center in New Orleans. Bart is saying that's rubbish because this character's got a different nose to the bloke that is outside of the trademark in New Orleans, right? But I think Bart, before he left and he's looking for something, was saying that he emphatically thinks this is Shelley, right?
It may be. I've always thought it was, but I can't prove it's not.
I mean, I guess one of the things we don't know is what did the people above the actual stockers wear? Did they wear suits?
Yeah, that's a great question. In a warehouse, I wouldn't think so, but then again,
Who knows? 1963, they could do.
Right, and everything below the everything below the 5th floor was office space. Correct?
Yes, the fourth to the second was office.
So you did, I mean, so if those supervisor types, they had, perhaps they had responsibilities in the warehouse section, but maybe they had to go into the office section at times and dressed as such. I don't know, totally making this up on the fly, but.
But did you in your head vision this guy on the far left?
Yeah.
Did you envisage Jack Doherty, who was allegedly some form of simpleton, according to the bullshit on the testimony? Did you ever think he would be wearing a suit and tie? I never imagined that.
No.
And he was supposed to be about what, 40? Was that right? He doesn't look 40, this character, does he?
Was he? I don't know his age at the time. I don't know.
I look it up. I mean, I could be talking shit, but my recall is I thought he was about 40.
But it's interesting that as much of the guy testified before the Warren Commission. He's a character in this whole thing, and we have no idea what the guy really looks like. I mean, we've got photographs of all these super secret Cuban exiles and CIA guys and all these covert. We got photographs upon photographs of some of these super secret Pentagon CIA guys, and we can't get a good photograph of a warehouse supervisor. Isn't that? That's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is interesting. Yeah. I mean, can you see that, by the way, in the background is Orson Welles by the tree? Can you
I see that guy back there. Yeah. Or Laurel and Hardy. I forget which one was that guy, but yeah.
I mean, who's that character, for Christ's sake?
Bill Harvey, maybe, right?
But anyway, so Rob's reveal is that the guy we've always thought is Shelley isn't Shelley. He's probably law enforcement based on Bonnie Ray Williams' testimony.
I see.
And now you've introduced the idea that the guy on the far left is Jack Doherty.
I'm introducing the idea that Rob suggested that could be better. I know how this stuff goes. It's pretty soon my inbox is going to be filled with people saying, "You think that's Jack Doherty? You're a nut. You're crazy." So,
by the way, can I just throw in another bullshit? Bullshit, just something else. The Danny Arcade guy.
Yeah.
At Organ 6, he's in front of the Dowtex building, and people are saying he's got a radio. Have you seen that photograph?
I think I have that photo on my website. Yeah, it's highly speculative, and I don't have his testimony up, but wasn't he? I'm trying to remember where he said he was at the time of the shots. Wasn't he didn't he say he was with Shelley out front of TSBD? Maybe I could be making that up.
I don't know. He looks very smart though, doesn't he, with that coat?
It's interesting. Look at. I wonder. You remember that bullshit thing about Jarman, Norman, and Williams, and I forget which one of them. One of the guys said, "Oh, I looked over at the other guy, and he had this white stuff in his hair, like plaster or something that had fallen down from above." Do you guys remember that?
Yes, yeah. And then he's got this white stuff on his shirt.
Yeah. I just wonder, like, what the heck? What is that? Like,
yeah,
it almost looks like he was either laying, on the floor or leaning up against something that was all dusty. Just interesting.
What's Bonnie Ray Williams? What's his first name? Is it Harold?
Bonnie. I think it was Bonnie Ray Williams, Harold Dean Norman, and James Earl Jarman Jr. were the three guys. So
Bonnie was his real name?
I believe so. Yeah.
Because there's a Mark Lane, the Rush to Judgment documentary. There's 5 minutes that have been excluded from the VHS that everyone's seen from Harold, a guy called Harold R. Williams, right? Who looks like this character.
Huh. Well,
it's a 1966 interview.
Now that I don't know.
It's Mark Lane. It's around the Rush to Judgment thing.
Yeah.
This character, Harold R. Williams, is saying that he saw Tippett and Ruby together.
Interesting stuff. Huh. Yeah. Well, why don't I finish up this slide so we can put that to bed, and then we can kind of continue with whatever you guys think. So anyway, one of my primary conclusions, this last one in the first section, these guys wanted to be seen. That's my opinion. But if you're a professional and you're really trying to kill somebody, are you going to be hanging yourself and your gun out the window in front of all these people below you? It doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know everything that was going on there and or why they would want to be seen exactly. I can speculate on that, like we talked before, but it makes no sense to me that these guys were whoever they were putting themselves on display with their guns up there for 15 minutes prior to the assassination. That is something I keep turning over in my head, trying to figure why that could be. Second one, the FBI and the Warren Commission intimidated witnesses and altered testimony. If you look at the Carr testimony, Robert Edwards, Amos Ewans, Carolyn Walther, Howard Brennan, and Ronald Fisher. Throughout the testimony of those witnesses, these guys are telling us directly, like, yeah, I almost got in a fight with David Bellin because he wanted me to change the guy's hair color. Or Amos Ewans on that audio recording saying they were trying to make me say things I didn't want to say, or on and on about law enforcement and the Warren Commission trying to influence or change testimony. And we see it in other places in this case too, outside of the scope of this discussion. But you guys have, I'm sure, all seen the movie JFK and the recounting they had in there of Julie Ann Mercer about when Garrison's questioning her and reading her Warren Commission testimony, and she says that, well, that's not what I said. That's not my signature. And there never was a notary present during any of my questioning. I know that the movie takes a lot of liberties with the facts. It's not necessarily a documentary, but if you read Julie Ann Mercer's testimony, she says the same thing in there, that no, that's not my signature. And I told him I recognized the guy as Jack Ruby. I don't know. I'm not saying she was not trying to say her testimony was accurate or not, but just pointing out the fact that that's another witness who says, yeah, that's what it says on the paper, but that ain't what I told them, and that's not my signature. So whenever you evaluate any of this witness stuff, I think it's really important to make a distinction between, yeah, I'm reading this in an FBI report, and this is what the FBI said this person said, or the Dallas police, or whoever, versus that person's direct testimony under oath, or a YouTube video or an audio recording, where you're getting that witness's just direct, unfiltered testimony. I think those are some of the most interesting statements that we have, those direct ones. And then again, I won't kind of go over all the points in this third one, but it's sort of reiterating what we talked about throughout this presentation. Is I think the most likely scenario is fire from the 5th floor. And if you look at the folks other than Bob Jackson and I think it was Crawford, the two that kind of mirrored the Warren Commission, the official story, but the other guys that saw stuff on the 6th floor, the two guys fooling around with the scope on the rifle 5 minutes before the assassination, or Arnold Rowland, a guy walking around up there with a rifle. I think some of that, clearly there were guys on the 6th floor, right? Because that's where they found the rifle. That's where they found the shells. So whether or not someone fired from a window up there, I guess we don't know for sure, but they were certainly up there to set up Oswald. And I think there is certainly enough testimony from enough witnesses for me to conclude that there was indeed also suspicious activity and possibly gunfire from the 5th floor. So in my mind, fire from the 5th floor and setting up Oswald is what the guys were doing on the 6th floor. That's kind of what I conclude from trying to sort out these 17 witnesses. I'm open to other views on that. I'm not saying for sure that's how it went down, but when I read through these 17 witnesses and these 75 statements, that's kind of where I end up. Is the real stuff went down on 5, and the guys up on 6 were probably setting him up there to set him up to plant the evidence. And then if you see out to the right there, I've got those little yellow and red arrows. So I make that statement, right? I say, well, this is my conclusion. White man firing from the southeast corner window. If you're interested in that, go to the statements of those witnesses listed there. And that's probably the best evidence for that in terms of what's in these statements. That's kind of how that's set up. I find it interesting that the last one there, the 6th floor, very limited support for a shooter on the 6th floor, Crawford and Jackson. You know, it's interesting if you look through these 17 witnesses and you look at the official story of these 17 people, 17 witnesses, there's 2 of them that clearly corroborate, you know, that could be used to clearly corroborate the official story. All the rest of them at least have some, either are directly in conflict with the official story or have something in them that is potentially a conflict or doesn't totally support the official story. So of the 17 witnesses, only having 2 that the Warren Commission could really, or that really support that official story, I think is interesting, right? 2 out of 17. You would think there would be more if it was, you know, and just even if you don't agree with the conclusions that I've put forth here, I mean, if you're somebody who supports the Warren Commission version, how do you explain all these witnesses who saw all these other people in these other windows, and, you know, blonde-haired guys and Latin guys and guys in sport coats and
old guys?
Yeah. I mean, how do you overcome? You can't. To me, I mean, I'm sure I know what a lot of these lone nut folks would just, oh, these people were wrong, or they didn't know, you know, they were mistaken or confused, or they're lying or whatever. I mean, okay, all 15 of this, you know, excluding the 2 that support the Warren Commission version, you know, it's hard for me to believe that the other 15 were just didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, again, they were right there. I mean, they were right there. So I'm not suggesting that all of their recollections and testimony are 100% accurate, but when I take 17 people and 75 statements, I can't just, to me, it's very difficult to throw the bulk of those out and say, well, they're mistaken, because it was, you know, they're saying they saw different people up there, blonde-haired guys, Latin guys in a sport coat. So, and multiple witnesses seeing different versions of that. So even if they're wrong about this window or that window, it's hard for me to believe that a witness could be wrong about, well, I said I saw someone when actually I didn't, I was mistaken. That's I don't know how you make that mistake. They could be wrong about the color of the, you know, I miscounted the floors, or the hair color was different than I thought, or whatever, maybe. But there's a lot of people that saw a lot of shit. So to me, I guess I didn't even put it on here, but the biggest conclusion is that, like, if you're an Oswald lone nut guy person, I don't know how you know, please tell me how you overcome what all these people that were right there saw, right? So even if it doesn't provide us with answers of exactly what happened, I think it's a pretty good case for, I know what didn't happen. One guy all by himself in this window. That's not.
Do you know what, Craig? I love your work. I love the minutiae. I love the TSBD. I love the Dealey Plaza thing. You know, I'm not. You know, I'm way behind the curve on so much stuff, but you know, I'm not into the whole macro big things, CIA.
Yeah.
My God, it's so difficult. You've got to be quite specialist, I think, in understanding spy craft and agency stuff. Likewise with ballistics and forensics and autopsy and medical stuff. Although I think probably everybody on this meeting today doesn't believe in the Spectre magic bullet bullshit, and you know, the 399 on the stretcher. I mean, it's rubbish. But we're not forensic scientists. We're not doctors, and we're not. I mean, certainly in the UK. Remember, you're talking to the DP UK. They've got no fucking experience at all of guns and arms, right? So you know, we're not into that, right? So I mean, you know, you have to pick your stuff, and you know, my mate Ryan, I think he's still on. You know, we've picked 12:30 to 2 o'clock. That's our bag, but you kind of have to include pre 12:30 to get to 12:30 to 2 o'clock, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But your minutiae and the way you organise your research, the spreadsheets and the matrices and the website, which is superb. I mean, you know, the chronological order and so forth. You know, absolutely fantastic. So, you know, I think, I mean, there's a lot of speculation still in the stuff that you do,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But as long as we admit that it's speculation, you know, that's fine, you know. But I really great work. I mean, I mean, it just seems so implausible that Lee Harvey Oswald was on the 6th floor sniper's nest
All by himself.
And didn't take a shot as the parade approached him.
Came up Houston, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that to me has been always the big thing for me. If you are a fucking crazy fucker, why don't you take the best shot because from a military perspective, as you're coming towards you, I mean, there's absolutely minute adjustment, right? Bang, right? But you'll never get away. You won't get away because you'll be seen, or it'll be, you know, there's a greater risk because it's coming towards the TSBD southeast corner. But I can't get over that. I've never been able to get over why didn't you do it then, right? And if he was an absolutely crazy fucker, why go through the whole alleged bus taxi Texas
Oh
theater?
yeah.
I'm innocent, you know. And he said something, didn't he, in the police station, the city hall, that, you know, I did not commit any act of violence, something along those lines. Well, that in itself is kind of a weird statement. Does that mean, well, I was kind of involved, but I didn't commit an act of violence?
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
that's,
you know,
isn't it fascinating to sit here and think, like, to wonder what the hell Oswald thought was happening that day? Like, I'm fascinated by, like, what did he think was going on, right? Like, did he know everything? Did he think something? I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything but wild speculation there, but it's fascinating to ponder, like, what must have been going through his mind as he gets arrested and is thinking, what in the fuck just happened? What am I in the middle of here? Did he know, or was he, you know, I don't know, but it's fascinating. And when you mentioned, well, first of all, Neil, thanks for the kind words about my research and my website. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. Nobody, like I said, in my
brilliant, Greg, all your essays that you post up there, pretty much all the essays I've downloaded and found from all over, you know, the net, or other researchers have sent them to me. And I mean, you've really nailed it in terms of, you know, your core stuff there.
I'm a guy in my basement just trying to find my way like a blind man in the dark. So thanks. That's really kind of you to say that. But, you know, in terms of speculation, I think you made a really good point. And I do speculate sometimes. And I think it's important. So two things. One, I think it's really important to identify, like, what we know and what we can prove, and versus what we think and are speculating on. But I think it's like, that's kind of at least the way my brain works, I guess, or the way I try to think of this stuff is like going through the documents and trying to understand what the facts are and what we really know. And there's no smoking guns or anything in there that's going to tell you really what happened. But that's where I think the fun is. Once you get the facts down and kind of know what they are, then your brain can go to work over the next days and weeks and months and years, turning those over in your head, going, well, what could that mean? Like, could it have happened? You know, the idea that, or I was speculating that, yeah, it was some operation in the TSBD to shoot up the plaza and get Kennedy pissed off at Castro and invade Cuba. And somebody got wind of that, slipped a couple of real guys into the plaza in front of him, popped him, slipped out, and the guys who ran the TSBD operation had no idea what the fuck happened. Total, I can't.
But you're right, it's total speculation. I mean, you can't hang your hat on anything. I mean, Ryan and I have been doing some stuff, and all I know at the moment, and we know, is that Kennedy was shot at 12:30.
Right? That's about the limit of what we can prove.
But we're not absolutely sure that Oswald was arrested at 1:50.
But it's the the scientific method, right? It's like the only thing I remember from 8th grade science is like you form a hypothesis and then you set out to try to prove or disprove it. And I guess that's sort of been my MO a little bit, is not sure what happened, but I wonder if it happened like this. And I wonder if there's, and I guess that's a good segue into my very last point, is the statements of Doherty, Jarman, Norman, Williams are false. I mean, I don't know I don't know if they were up there or they weren't, or what they saw or didn't see, or how it really went down. But in my opinion, when you read the statements of all these people who said they saw shit going down on the 5th floor, there's no way that those guys can be telling the truth in their statements. And I think that's corroborated, or that's further illustrated by the fact that if you read their statements, they don't make any fucking sense. They don't agree with one another. And there are so many problems in every one of them. And, it's something that I would like to do at some point, or maybe some other one of you guys will do it, or somebody else, but taking all the statements of those 4 guys and just putting together what all the serious problems are, and how there's no, no way that they can be true. Just forgetting about all these other witnesses, just their own statements and how they change and conflict. And the fact that they're all up there and they don't see each other. Doherty doesn't see them, they don't see him. But anyway, so guys, that's it. I think that's the end of my slide deck here. So,
but on this statements front,
yeah,
there's some other guys. I don't know if they're still on the call, that have written books and everything, but I just don't know what to trust, right? We know the FBI altered statements, right?
Yep.
We know the Warren Commission deliberately chose not to sequest certain individuals, such as the Newmans.
Yep.
Sandra Stiles. There's tens of critical witnesses that they chose not to interview. So we've got amendments to statements, and we've got evidence that's been lost, stolen, deep sixed. So it's actually, I personally, as a very interested person / quasi researcher, because I don't want to big myself up, I find it impossible. I actually find it impossible. I mean, the one thing that really frustrates me, and I don't know if some of the older researchers are still here on the call, John and Gary maybe, they at least perhaps were able to interview people. We can't interview anybody now.
That's
John, you're on the call still, aren't you? Can you comment on that?
I think you're muted, John.
Yeah, you're muted, John.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
We go.
There he is.
Earlier on, I wasn't unmuted. Okay. Yeah. Well, Gary and I have interviewed several people. He's interviewed others, and I've interviewed others. And the sense of it is for us at least, looking for truth. And sometimes the truth that a person has may not actually be true, but what they say is what they say. And to misrepresent that, in the book, The Girl on the Stairs, there's the interview of her by one of the Warren Commission lawyers. And it's so funny because the questions have been inverted to make it different. They might have actually used the actual statements, but put them in a different order. And it gives a different, and you can tell they're in the wrong order because the questions that they ask, like describing where the place took place and asking them, is this right, is like at the end of the interview. You don't do that at the end of an interview. You do that early on so you can have a way of going logically to the next point. And what's published in the Warren Report is clearly a misuse of the words of the person.
Yep.
Even if the words are correct, they are misleading. And to do that is not research.
Yeah.
It's actually trying to put a lie into things.
The opposite. Yeah.
The trouble is, John, I mean, all the, we're essentially going back to this whole obfuscation kind of concept, aren't we? That they didn't call it the right witnesses,
Mhm.
right? They, whether it was FBI or whether it was whoever, amended affidavits, right?
Well-
And then there were counsels at the Warren Commission that were leading the witnesses.
Mhm.
They went off the record, right? Which I understand
Mhm.
why you might want to go off the record. For example, Harry Olsen, the DPD guy married to Kay Cole, whatever her name was, the stripper,
Yeah.
was guarding an estate in inverted
Guarding
commas.
an estate. Yeah.
Well, he was actually guarding it was a deceased person. He was guarding an estate in that respect, right? But, he was off the record, and I read somewhere else, I don't know where it was, that actually the reason he was off the record was because he stated that Jack Ruby was a homosexual, right? And they didn't want that. They didn't want to hear that for whatever reason, maybe the zeitgeist, I don't know, right? So in some ways that might have been a legitimate reason to go off the record, right?
Mhm.
But there must have been, I mean, when you read all this stuff and you go through the testimonies, you're thinking, why the fuck are you going off the record? Has anybody read Mary Bledsoe's testimony?
I don't think
Oh
so.
my God, what a shit show that is, right? It's all about the bus ride / Oswald lodging with her, I think in October of '63. And it's almost impossible. Have you read McWaters?
Yeah. Cecil McWaters.
You can't even understand that, can you?
No, it's a train wreck.
So we've got stuff that lawyers or interviewers are not getting to. We've got lawyers leading the questions. We've got lawyers taking it off the record. We've got witnesses that weren't even called, like the Newmans.
Mhm.
I mean, how the hell can we get to the end of this?
Well, and to your point, and to something John mentioned earlier, that's it's not definitive, but that's why I think it's important, like with these witnesses, right? There's some of them gave up to 14 different, between the FBI reports and their DPD interview and their Secret Service interview and their Warren Commission testimony, articles are quoted in, and on and on and on. That's why I think it's important to gather as much of the data as we can, even though we know that the FBI fucked around with some of it. Maybe they're mistaken about something they saw. There's lots of things that could be going wrong with these, or imperfect about these various accounts. But I think the larger universe that we have to pull from, right? The more of these statements we can get and put them in chronological order to see how they changed or didn't change over time. I think that's, excuse me, probably our best shot at trying to figure out what a particular witness, like Amos or Ewan's, for example, saw, is like Ewan's. Until I found that audio of his HSCA stuff, I just find it striking that in none of his other interviews, it came up that he had a fucking camera and was taking pictures. How does that just not come up? It's fascinating. So not getting us off track, going back to my point here, I think it's really important to, get as many instances of when these people went on the record as we possibly can,
Yeah.
and then lay them out in chronological order. He said this first, and the FBI said he said this, and then he gave this testimony, and read them in order and try to see if you can make sense of it.
No, I love, do you know what? I've already, blown your trumpet, but I love your methodology. It's it is of our time. I mean, you've got the tools to write spreadsheets out, which a lot of people couldn't do 30 years ago. To be fair, I mean, could, but they were scraps of paper, right? So we can do that. Do you know Brooks LaPlante?
No, I don't.
Oh, he's a brilliant researcher.
Yeah.
Let me put you in touch with him. He's doing the same sort of stuff that we're doing, really focusing on micro stuff around DP, TSBD, and Oak Cliff.
Yeah, that's that'd be great. And I think that's, like I mentioned earlier, and Neil, maybe you touched on it too. That's with this case. I mean, if I was independently wealthy, didn't have to work for a living, didn't have a girlfriend, lived by myself, I still wouldn't have enough time to, to do everything you want to do in this case. It's just you almost have to, and it's so fascinating. It's hard for me to resist the temptation of going on all these different rabbit holes. But at some point I felt like, okay, I've got to pick a lane here, because I can't, there's just so much, trying to pick one aspect and really focus in on it is.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, when I started corresponding with you after that Lance or Kappa thing, whatever you did about a year ago, you said you were working on another project. Dare I ask what you're working on?
So I had two things. I have nothing in complete enough to really share or put together in a formal way, but one was an analysis of the Jarman, Norman, Williams, Doherty. Take just their testimonies, taking those apart and just illustrating how there's no way they can be true and all the major problems with them. That was one and so I haven't done anything on it. The other one, have you guys heard of a guy named John Adrian O'Hare? Is that a name anybody?
Anybody else?
No.
Fascinating dude. I've got a photo page on him under the Army Intelligence section. And in there's under the documents, there's selected documents, and then there's articles and essays. I think it's the selected documents if you look up John Adrian O'Hare.
It's on your website.
It is, yeah. But this guy,
Tony, can you pull that up? Are you still there, Tony?
Yep, still here. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going to be wrapping this up, guys, very, very quickly. We were going to finish half an hour ago.
So, all right. Sorry, I got a big mouth.
Go to Tony.
Hey,
haven't you got a union meeting to go to?
I wish. No, thankfully not.
That'd be less.
What's the website? What's the website? Oh, hang on. Let me share my screen.
So I'll wrap it up real quick with this dude. But I've been talking to his son Tom, and this guy faked his own death in 1975. Went by a bunch of different names. He was Air Force. He was in 1963. He was on loan from the Air Force to an Army Special Operations group in Tampa, who was working with the CIA on some projects. And his son Tom thinks that the guys he was involved with, the CIA guys he was involved with, were Rip Robertson and Grayston Lynch. Right. But there's very little on this guy out there. I don't know that he has any connection to Dealey Plaza. His son thinks he does or may have. And James Richards, my Australian researcher friend, who has a personal background in all this military, mercenary, secret guy kind of stuff. He speculates that O'Hare could have been a guy. He had all the right connections and was mixing with the right people back then. He could have been a guy that somebody like a Morales could have tapped and said, I need you to put a team, in Dealey Plaza to do this. So no evidence that he was part of it other than a couple of photographs that maybe kind of look like him, which are on the photo page of him. But I've been talking with his son, Tom, and I don't have him up on the website because can't get him to play. But NBC was actually going to do some sort of TV piece on this John Adrian O'Hare and was talking to his son, Tom, about it. And I've got audio recordings of a couple of those phone conversations. But yeah, the guy apparently faked his own death in 1975 and ended up in Africa under the protection of Mad Mike Hoare. And I think there's a couple articles on my website. There were some guys digging into this back in the 70s, and I posted those articles up there. So I've been working on a couple FOIA requests for this guy and trying to find out as much as I can about him. But it's kind of stuck in the mud, so I don't have anything more than speculation and what his kid thinks and what is in those articles on my website. But fascinating guy. Even his family doesn't know who this guy really was. I mean, if you look at his birth date on his death certificate and on his marriage certificate, which are both on my site, they're different by 2 years. So even on his official documents, we don't know what the guy's real birth date was. His son doesn't know what his real birth date was. So he's a fascinating guy. So that's the other thing I was hoping to have more on and be able to start work on something on John Adrian O'Hare, but I just don't have enough. So that's the long answer to the question of what else.
That seems like a good time to stop the recording. We can still keep on talking though, Greg. But I'm going to stop the recording so we don't run out of juice on the space. But thank you so much, and what a great, really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and it sparked a great debate discussion amongst us. So many thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.